The lock had been changed. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm flat against the front door of the house she had lived in for 13 years and felt the cold wood push back at her like a stranger. She tried the key again. She turned it left. She turned it right. She pulled it out and looked at it under the yellow porch light, checking whether she had grabbed the wrong one by mistake. She had not. It was the same key she had used that morning when she left for her shift at the grocery store. Silver, slightly scratched at the tip from years of use, with a small chip of blue nail polish on the head that she had put there herself so she could find it quickly in her bag. The lock had been changed while she was at work. She stood on the porch for a moment without moving. The cold was the kind that did not announce itself. It did not arrive in a gust or a shiver. It simply pressed in from every side at once, finding the gaps in her coat, her sleeves, the space between her collar and her neck. It was January 11th. The temperature that evening was sitting at 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was still dropping. Elena knocked. She knocked again. She pressed the doorbell twice, listened to it ring inside the house, and waited. A light was on in the living room. She could see it through the narrow gap at the side of the curtain. Someone was home. She could hear the television. She recognized the sound of the show her stepmother Carol liked to watch in the evenings, something with a lot of people arguing about cooking. She knocked harder. The porch light went off. Elena stood in the dark for a full minute, her knuckles still raised. She lowered her hands slowly. She turned around and sat down on the top step because her legs had gone a little strange under her, and she needed a moment before she could think clearly. She was 22 years old. She had $38 in her checking account. She was wearing a canvas jacket over a fleece pullover, and she had left her heavier winter coat inside the house that morning because the weather app had said the high would be 34 degrees, and she had believed it. She had left it on the hook by the back door, the green one with the hood and the broken zipper that she had been meaning to fix for 2 months. Her phone showed 11:04 p.m. She called her father's number. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. She called again, voicemail again. She sent a text message that said, "Dad, the lock is different, I can't get in. Please call me." She watched the 2 small check marks appear next to the message, the ones that meant he had received it. She watched them for a long time. They did not turn blue. The stars above the street were very clear that night. That was always the sign of bitter cold. The sky went sharp and bright, and everything below it went hard and still. Elena had learned that as a child, from her mother, who used to point at the sky on nights like that, and say that the stars were showing off because the clouds had gone to bed. She had been 9 years old the last time her mother said that to her. She had been 9 years old the last time a lot of things. When Elena's mother, Patricia, died of a sudden illness in the spring, her father, Owen Vasquez, had grieved in the way that some men do, quickly, with his face turned away from everyone, and then not at all. He had met Carol 14 months later. He had married her 8 months after that. Carol had come with 2 children from a previous marriage, a boy named Derek who was 7 and a girl named Mia who was 5, and Owen had taken to them the way a man takes to a second chance at something he feels he had done wrong the first time. Elena had not been part of that second chance. She understood that now, sitting on the frozen porch steps. She had not understood it clearly when she was 10, or 12, or even 16. She had spent years telling herself that her father was simply tired, that Carol was simply adjusting, that Derek and Mia were simply younger and needed more attention. She had been very good at telling herself those things. She had practice. She had been telling herself comfortable stories about her family since the week after her mother's funeral, when she had come downstairs to find Carol already reorganizing the kitchen cabinets. She pulled her knees to her chest and tucked her hands under her arms for warmth. The step she was sitting on was concrete, and the cold had moved through her jeans and was now working steadily upward. She needed to move. She needed to go somewhere. She needed to think about where that somewhere was. She had no close friends with spare rooms. Her co-worker at the grocery store, a girl named Penny who was 19 and cheerful in the way of people who have not yet been tired out by life, shared an apartment with 3 other people. There was no space there. Elena knew this because Penny had once shown her photos of the apartment and laughed about how the bathroom was so small that the door hit the toilet when you opened it. She thought about the 24-hour diner on Callaway Street. She had enough money for coffee. Coffee would be warm. Coffee would buy her time to think. She stood up, pulled her jacket tighter, and walked down the steps. The walk to Callaway Street was 11 minutes. Elena knew it was 11 minutes because she had walked it many times, usually on summer evenings when the air was warm and the neighborhood was full of the sound of people having dinner with their windows open. At 11 in the evening in January, the street was empty. The sodium lights along the sidewalk cast an orange glow on the iced-over patches near the curb. Elena walked carefully, keeping to the center of the sidewalk where the concrete was dry. She passed the Hendersons' house. where a single wreath still hung on the door from Christmas 3 weeks ago. She passed the park where she had spent every afternoon the summer she was 11, sitting on the swings and reading library books because the house had felt too full of the wrong kind of quiet. She passed the corner where a cat often sat on top of a blue recycling bin, but the cat was not there tonight. Even the cat had found somewhere warm. The diner was called Len's. It had been called Len's for 30 years according to the sign, which also said open 24 hours in red letters, that had faded to a pale pink. Elena pushed open the glass door and a small bell above it rang. The warmth hit her immediately. That thick grease and coffee warmth of a diner at midnight, the kind that wraps around you like a heavy blanket. She breathed it in. She felt her shoulders drop slightly from where they had been sitting, somewhere near her ears. A woman behind the counter looked up. She was middle-aged, with dark hair pulled back in a clip and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She had the look of a person who had seen every kind of person walk through that door at midnight and was surprised by none of them. "Sit anywhere," she said. Elena sat in a booth near the window. She ordered a black coffee because it was the cheapest thing on the menu. The woman brought it without expression and went back to whatever she had been reading behind the counter. Elena wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth moved from her palms up through her fingers, which had gone nearly numb on the walk over. She sat there and let herself feel it. Just the warmth, just the mug, just the simple fact of being somewhere indoors, for a full minute before she let herself think about anything else. She thought about money first, because money was the most concrete problem. She had $38. She had been paid 3 days ago, but her paycheck had mostly gone to the fee she had sent Carol for household expenses, which Carol had started charging her 2 years ago when Elena turned 20, declaring that Elena was now an adult and should contribute financially. The amount had begun at $80 per month and had gradually become $150, with Carol explaining each increase by citing rising grocery prices or the cost of the internet, which Elena used for her online courses. Elena had been taking 2 online courses at a time for nearly 3 years. She was working toward a business certificate because she could not afford a full degree program, but she had figured out that the certificate would be enough to eventually get her into an office job with a salary, something that paid more than the $11.40 per hour she made at the grocery store. She had been careful about this plan. She had written it down. She had a notebook where she tracked her courses and her grades and the dates of exams. She kept it under her mattress. Her notebook was inside the house on Callaway Lane. Her winter coat was inside the house on Callaway Lane. Her laptop, which she needed for her courses, was inside the house on Callaway Lane. She had left it charging on the small desk in her room because she had been planning to study that evening after her shift. She took a slow breath through her nose. The coffee steamed in front of her. She picked up her phone and searched for emergency shelter options in the city. There were 3 results. One was a men's-only shelter. One was a family shelter with a note that said the waiting list was currently paused. The third was a women's shelter called the Harbor House, located about 2 miles away, with a phone number and a note that said to call before arriving. She called. It rang 11 times. Someone picked up. "Harbor House, this is the overnight line." "Hi," Elena said. I'm looking for a place to stay tonight. I've been locked out of my home." There was a pause, the sound of papers shifting. "Can I ask your age?" 22. "Okay. I have to be honest with you. We're at full capacity tonight. We have an emergency overflow situation from the last 2 weeks, and all our beds are currently occupied. I can put your name on the waiting list, but the current estimate is about 10 to 11 days before a bed opens." Elena looked at the window beside her booth. The glass was fogged slightly from the warmth inside the diner, but she could see the street clearly enough. It was very dark. A single car moved through the intersection 2 blocks away. 10 or 11 days, she repeated. "I'm sorry. I know that's not what you were hoping to hear. Is there any family or friend you can stay with in the meantime?" Elena thought about her father, who had read her message and not replied. She thought about Carol, who had changed the lock while Elena was at work and then turned off the porch light. She thought about her half-brother Derek, who was now 20 and in college 2 states away, and had never once, in 13 years, called Elena just to talk. She thought about Mia, who was 18 and had her mother's expressions and her mother's habit of looking through Elena rather than at her. "No," Elena said. "There's no one." "Okay," the woman on the phone said. She sounded tired, but not unkind. "Let me give you the number for the city's emergency housing line. They have a different protocol for same-night situations." She gave Elena a number. Elena wrote it on her hand with the pen she found at the bottom of her bag. She thanked the woman and hung up. She called the emergency housing line. A recorded message told her that due to high demand, wait times were averaging 4 to 6 hours. She pressed 1 to be added to the callback queue. She ordered a second coffee. The diner stayed warm. The woman behind the counter changed the station on the small television mounted above the coffee machine to something with a weather report. The meteorologist on the screen, a young man with neat hair and an optimistic tie, stood in front of a map of the state covered in blue. The blue meant cold. The numbers in the blue boxes ranged from 8 degrees to 16. He was pointing at the area where Elena's city sat and saying something about overnight lows that Elena could not quite hear over the ambient noise of the diner. She looked at the numbers and felt something settle in her chest that was not quite fear and not quite calm. It was something more basic than either of those things. It was the recognition of a problem that was very simple. She needed to be somewhere warm before it got any colder outside, and she had very few options for making that happen. She thought about her mother, not with grief. She had done most of that grieving when she was young, in the methodical way that children grieve when they do not have the vocabulary for it yet. She thought about her mother the way you think about the roof of a house when you are standing in the rain, not with longing exactly, with the plain awareness of an absence. Her mother had been a woman who believed in being prepared. She kept an emergency kit in the trunk of her car with a blanket and a flashlight and a bottle of water. She kept a list of phone numbers written on paper and taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet, because she said you should never rely entirely on a phone for the things that matter most. She had taught Elena to check the weather before getting dressed, to keep a small amount of cash in an envelope hidden in her room, to know the names of her neighbors in case she ever needed help. Elena had followed most of those lessons. She had the cash envelope, but it held only $12, and it was inside the house. She had checked the weather that morning, and she had been wrong to trust what it said. She did not know her neighbors well enough to knock on their doors at midnight. What her mother had not prepared her for was this: the situation in which the danger came not from the world outside, but from the house that was supposed to be home. The woman behind the counter came to refill Elena's coffee without being asked. "Long night?" she said. "A little," Elena said. The woman looked at her for a moment in the direct, uncomplicated way of someone who deals with people in their real estates every night of the week. "There's no rush," she said. "Take your time." She went back to the counter. Elena took her time. Around 1 in the morning, her phone buzzed. She thought for one quick, bright moment that it was her father calling back. It was the emergency housing line. The woman on the line was professional and efficient. She asked Elena several questions: her age, her situation, whether she had experienced any violence that evening, whether she had any medical conditions that required immediate attention. Elena answered each question clearly. The woman typed as she listened. "Okay," the woman said at the end. "I have 2 options for you tonight. There's a general emergency overnight shelter at the community center on Morris Avenue. They have space. It's mixed gender, large open room, cots. Or there is a placement option with one of our registered host families, but that address won't be available until 3 a.m. at the earliest." "I'll take the community center," Elena said. The woman gave her the address. It was about 1.5 miles away. Elena paid for her coffee. Both cups came to $4.50, and she left a $1 tip because the woman had been kind and had refilled without being asked. And she pushed open the door of the diner and stepped back into the night. The cold was worse than before. She had not thought that was possible, but it was. The temperature had dropped while she sat in the warmth of Lens, and the air now had a physical quality to it, something almost solid, something that pushed against her face and found every edge of exposed skin. She walked. She walked past closed storefronts and dark apartment buildings and a laundromat that was still lit from inside, the machines running with no one watching them, the warm glow of its windows spilling yellow light onto the sidewalk. She thought about stopping. She kept walking. She found the community center on Morris Avenue after about 25 minutes. It was a low concrete building with a parking lot and a sign by the door that said, "Emergency overnight use. Enter at side." She followed the arrow around to a side door where a young man in a vest was sitting on a folding chair under an awning, holding a clipboard. He looked up at her. He had a kind face, round and a little tired. "You called in?" he asked. "Yes," Elena said. "Elena Vasquez." He checked his list, found her name, and put a check next to it. "Come on in," he said. "We've got a cot in the women's section. There are extra blankets on the shelf by the bathroom. There's a water station and some packaged snacks. Lights go out at 2, but you can use your phone with the brightness turned down." "Thank you," Elena said. She went inside. The room was large and warm, and smelled of industrial cleaning fluid and old carpet. About 30 cots were arranged in rows, most of them occupied by people who were already asleep or very still under their blankets. At the far end, separated by a low divider, was the women's section. Elena counted 8 cots. 4 were occupied. She found the one that was unclaimed and sat down on it. She took off her shoes and set them neatly side by side next to the cot. She lay down on her back and pulled a blanket over herself. The blanket was thin, but it was something. The ceiling above her was white tile with fluorescent lights that had been switched off, leaving only the glow from 2 emergency exit signs at either end of the room, one green, one red. She lay there and looked at the ceiling. She thought about the key in her bag, the one that no longer worked. She thought about the porch light going off. She thought about her father's phone ringing 5 times and going silent. She did not cry, not because she was not sad, but because the cold had done something to her insides, dried them out, clarified them, the way hard weather clarifies everything. What she felt was not sadness yet. Sadness would come later, in quieter moments, when she had the warmth and the space to feel it properly. What she felt right now was much simpler. She felt the exact shape of what her family had always been, stripped of every story she had ever told herself to make it easier to live with. She felt the shape of 13 years of being the one who adjusted, the one who made herself smaller, the one who told herself it was fine when it was not fine, the one who did not complain because complaining would make things harder and harder was the one thing she could not afford. She felt all of that very clearly, lying on a cot in a community center in the middle of January, listening to the breathing of strangers who were also having the hardest nights of their lives. She pulled the blanket tighter. Outside, the temperature continued to drop. She closed her eyes and thought about what she would do in the morning. The morning was manageable. The morning was a concrete set of steps that she could take one at a time. In the morning, she would call the Harbor House again. She would call her job to explain that she might be late for her next shift. She would figure out a way to get her laptop and her notebook and her winter coat from the house on Callaway Lane. She would not think about her father's unread message, not tonight. She would not think about Carol's hand on the lock, turning it, sealing her out with all the calm of someone taking out the trash. Not tonight. Tonight she would sleep, because sleep was the one thing that cost nothing, and she had learned a long time ago to take the free things when they were offered. The green exit sign glowed above the room. Elena Vasquez closed her eyes. She slept. She woke up before the lights came on. The community center was still in that particular early morning quiet where you could hear every breath and every small shift in the room around you. Elena lay still for a moment, looking at the white tile ceiling, and let herself come back to the facts of where she was and why she was there. She had gotten good at that over the years. The first few seconds after waking up were sometimes the only peaceful ones, before the brain finished assembling the full picture. She had learned not to waste them fighting the reassembly. Better to let it come. There it was, the lock, the porch light going off, the 5 rings and voicemail. She sat up. Her back was stiff from the cot, which was a thin pad over a metal frame and had not been designed with any idea of comfort in mind. The blanket had slipped off one shoulder sometime in the night. Her mouth was dry. Her left hand felt strange. She looked at her hand. The 2 middle fingers, the ring finger and the middle finger, were swollen slightly at the tips, with a pale, waxy color that was different from the rest of her skin. She pressed the tip of her ring finger gently with her thumb and felt very little. The feeling came a second late, like a signal traveling through a bad connection. She had been reading about frostbite for a class the previous semester, not because she had expected to need the information, but because it had come up in a chapter on environmental medicine and she had found it interesting at the time. She remembered that the first stage, what they called frostnip, which was the least serious version, produced exactly this: pale, slightly numb skin, tingling that arrived late. It was reversible. It meant the tissue had been cold enough to be affected but had not yet been damaged deeply. She had not known, when she read that chapter, that she would be testing the information on herself. She moved carefully off the cot, folded the blanket, put her shoes back on, and found the bathroom near the side of the room. She ran warm, not hot, just warm, water over her fingers in the sink for about 10 minutes, the way the chapter had said. The feeling came back slowly. It was not pleasant when it came back. It was the kind of feeling that reminded you the nerves were there and had opinions about what had happened to them. But the color was returning. The waxy look faded. She dried her hands on a paper towel and looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. She looked exactly like someone who had spent the night on a cot in a community center after being locked out of her home in January. She splashed water on her face and pushed her hair back and told herself that she looked fine. She did not entirely believe herself, but it was something to say. By 7 in the morning, the cot section was being cleared. The young man from the night before, whose name tag Elena had not caught, came through and quietly let people know that they had until 7:30. and that there was coffee and boxed cereal at the table by the entrance. Elena had coffee and a small box of cornflakes that she ate dry because there was no milk. She sat at a folding table and ate and thought about the day ahead in the methodical way her mother had taught her. Start with what is most urgent, work outward. Most urgent, her phone needed to be charged. She found an outlet near the entrance and plugged in for 15 minutes while she thought. Second, her belongings at the house. Her laptop, her coat, her notebook, the small amount of cash in the envelope, her other clothes. She owned very little, but what she owned she needed. She called her father. Voicemail, immediately this time. He had declined the call rather than let it ring. She sent another text. It said, "I need to get my things from the house. I'll come by this morning. Please let me in." She watched the check marks appear. She watched them stay gray. She called the Harbor House next and spoke to someone different from the night before. A man who confirmed that her name was on the wait list and that the current estimate was still around 10 days. He sounded genuinely sorry about this. Elena told him she understood. She asked whether there was anything she could do to move the process along. He said she could come in person to fill out the formal intake paperwork, which would make the placement go faster once a bed opened. She wrote the address on her hand next to the emergency line number from the night before. She unplugged her phone. It was at 41%, not ideal but workable, and thanked the overnight coordinator and stepped outside. The morning was cold but bright. Sunlight came through the leafless trees at a low angle and threw long shadows across the parking lot. The air had a bite to it that the sunshine did nothing to soften. Elena put her hands in her pockets and started walking. She did not go to the house on Callaway Lane first. She went to the Harbor House. It was located in a part of the city that Elena did not know well, in a converted brick building between a used bookstore and a dental office. There was a small sign by the door that was deliberately understated, just the name and a phone number. Nothing that would make it easy for someone to identify from across the street. Elena pushed the buzzer. A woman answered through the intercom, and Elena explained who she was and why she had come. The door unlocked. Inside, the Harbor House was not what Elena had expected. She had imagined something institutional, the same pale green walls and fluorescent lights as the community center. Instead, the front room had warm lighting and a couch with actual cushions and a low table with a plant on it that was green and obviously alive and recently watered. A woman came out from a door at the back. She was perhaps 55, with short gray hair and reading glasses around her neck on a beaded cord. "Elena?" she said. "Yes. I'm Gloria. I run the daytime intake here. Come sit down." Elena sat on the couch. Gloria sat in a chair across from her with a clipboard and a box of tissues on the table between them. But she did not offer the tissues in a pointed way, just left them there, the way you might leave a glass of water, available, not insisted upon. Gloria asked her questions. Elena answered them. The questions were about her situation, her history with the house, her family relationships, her employment, her financial situation. Elena answered each one clearly and without adding anything extra. She had always been a person who gave precise answers to direct questions. It was one of the things that had made her good at her online courses. The professors liked students who answered the question that was asked, rather than the question they wished had been asked. At the end of the questions, Gloria looked at her notes for a moment. "Okay," she said. "You're formally on our wait list now. Everything is documented. The moment a bed opens, and we do have some movement expected early next week, you'll be the first call." "Thank you," Elena said. "In the meantime, I want to give you some information about daytime resources. There's a drop-in center on Fletcher Street that's open from 8 to 6, warm space, Wi-Fi, lockers, shower access. There are also 2 food pantries within walking distance." She wrote the addresses on a card and handed it to Elena. Elena took the card. She looked at the list of addresses and the phone numbers printed in small, clear type. She thought about the fact that she had not known, yesterday morning, that she would be sitting here reading this card today. She thought about how completely ordinary her day had seemed when she woke up at 7, made coffee, checked the weather app, and headed to her shift at the grocery store. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Of course. Is it common? Someone's family just—" She stopped, looking for the right word. "Just doing this." Gloria was quiet for a moment. She had the look of someone who knew that how she answered this question mattered. "It's more common than most people know," she said, and she said it plainly, without adding anything soft around it to make it easier to hear. "And I want you to know that being here, doing what you're doing right now, getting on a list, asking for resources, taking the steps, that's not a small thing. A lot of people in your situation don't do this. They wait, hoping it will get better on its own." Elena nodded. She tucked the card into her jacket pocket. She left the harbor house and started walking toward Callaway Lane. It took her about 20 minutes. She spent most of that time thinking about what she would say if Carol opened the door. She had different versions ready. A version that was direct and factual. A version that was quiet and firm. She had even prepared, somewhere in the back of her mind, a version that was the most difficult one. The one where she did not say anything at all, just stood there and let the silence do the work. She rang the doorbell at 9:17 a.m. Carol opened the door. She was wearing a robe and holding a mug of coffee. She looked at Elena with an expression that was almost entirely without emotion. Not angry, not guilty, just flat in the way of someone who has already settled a question in their own mind and considers it done. "You need to call your father," Carol said. "This is between you and him." "He won't answer," Elena said. "Then wait until he does." "Carol, I need my things. My laptop, my coat, my clothes. Your father will sort that out when he's ready to talk." Elena looked at her. She made herself keep her voice very even, because even was the only register that worked in conversations like this one. Anything else gave the other person something to react to. And she had learned over years of practice that Carol's favorite move was to react. "My laptop is my property," Elena said. "My clothes are my property. If you don't let me get them, that's theft. I don't want to make this a legal matter, but I will if I have to." Carol's expression shifted very slightly. "Not much, just enough." "Wait here," she said. She closed the door, not slammed, just closed. Elena stood on the porch in the cold and waited. After about 8 minutes, the door opened again, and a black garbage bag was set on the porch. Carol had gone back inside before Elena even reached for it. Elena opened the bag. Inside was a random collection of items. Some clothes, her toiletries bag, her phone charger, one of her textbooks. Her laptop was there. Her notebook was not. Her winter coat was not. The cash envelope was not. She stood there looking into the bag. She thought about knocking again and asking for the rest. She weighed how much it would cost her in energy and in dignity, against how much she needed those things. The coat was significant. The cash was $12, and $12 mattered when you had 38. The notebook was her record of everything, her course progress, her grades, her plans. She knocked. Carol did not come to the door. She knocked again. The porch light, though it was daytime, turned off. Elena picked up the garbage bag and walked away. She found a bench at the small park 2 blocks from the house, the one where she had played as a child, and she sat down and went through the bag carefully. She organized what was there. She folded the clothes back neatly. She checked that the laptop was undamaged. It was. She plugged in her earbuds to test them. They worked. She called her workplace, the grocery store where she had been working for 14 months. She asked for her supervisor, a man named Craig who was generally reasonable about things as long as you told him in advance. She told him she had a family emergency and might need to rearrange her schedule for the next few days. Craig said that was fine, to keep him posted, and that her next scheduled shift was Friday, which was 2 days away. 2 days. She had 2 days before she needed to show up somewhere looking like someone who had their life in order. She could do that. She sat in the park with the garbage bag at her feet and opened her laptop and connected to the park's public Wi-Fi, which she knew from years of walking past the sign that said it existed. She checked her course pages. She had an assignment due in 4 days for her accounting module. She had a quiz the following Monday. She made a note of the dates. The cold on the bench was significant. It moved through her coat, the canvas jacket, the insufficient one, and sat against her sides and her back. She lasted about 30 minutes before she had to move again. She thought of the drop-in center on Fletcher Street that Gloria had written on the card. Warm space, Wi-Fi, showers. She picked up her bag and started walking. The drop-in center was in a low building with bright yellow doors. Inside, the space was warm and open, with tables and chairs and charging stations along one wall. There were about 20 people there when Elena arrived, scattered around the room in small clusters or alone. Nobody looked up when she walked in. Nobody asked her to explain herself. A woman at the front desk gave her a locker key and told her the showers were in the back. Towels provided. Limit of 15 minutes during busy hours. Elena put her bag in the locker. She took a shower. It was 15 minutes of hot water, and she stood under it and let the heat work into her shoulders and her neck and her cold hands. And she thought about nothing in particular except the warmth. When she came out, she found a table near a window and opened her laptop. She had work to do. She had an assignment to write and a quiz to prepare for and a plan to build. The day moved around her while she worked. People came and went. The room hummed with the low noise of other lives happening nearby. The click of keyboards, the murmur of conversations, the occasional phone call. Elena worked through it. She had always been able to work through ambient noise. Her room at home had never been especially quiet, with the television downstairs and Mia's music and Derek's visits in the before times when he still lived there. Around noon, a volunteer came around with sandwiches. Elena took one. It was turkey on white bread, and it was one of the best things she had eaten in recent memory, not because of any particular quality it had, but because it was free and she had not expected it. She thought about what it meant to be grateful for a free sandwich. She thought about this with a kind of clear, unsentimental curiosity, the way she thought about things she did not want to feel sentimental about but wanted to understand. 3 days ago, she had been annoyed that the grocery store was out of the brand of pasta she liked. Today, she was grateful for a free sandwich. Things changed fast. That was the information. She went back to her assignment. By late afternoon, she had completed a draft of the accounting assignment and reviewed her notes for the quiz. She had also, on a separate document, made a list of her situation's moving parts. Shelter wait list, belongings still at house, cash situation, shift on Friday, locker at the drop-in center, Gloria's card, the phone numbers written on her hand in pen that was beginning to blur from the day. She copied the phone numbers into her phone contacts so she would not lose them. At 5:30, a few minutes before the center was due to close, the woman at the front desk, her name tag said Donna, came over and told Elena that there was a spot available at a partner motel about a mile away, through an emergency program that paid for 2 nights for people on a shelter wait list. She would need to show her waitlist confirmation from the Harbor House and a piece of ID, but if she had those, she could have the room tonight and tomorrow night. Elena had her ID. She had the Harbor House paperwork. She walked to the motel. It was a budget motel with a parking lot and a vending machine outside the lobby, and a front desk clerk who processed her paperwork without comment and gave her a key card for room 108. The room had a bed, a television, a bathroom with a shower, and a small radiator beneath the window that rattled when it ran, but pushed out a steady, dependable heat. Elena set her garbage bag on the floor. She sat on the edge of the bed. The room was not much. The carpet was patterned in a way that had gone out of style about 20 years ago, and the overhead light had a slight flicker, but it was warm. It was private. The door had a lock, and the lock was one that she had the key to. She turned off the overhead light and lay down on top of the bedspread with her jacket still on, because she was still cold in some deep part of herself that the day had not fully reached yet. She thought about her fingers and checked them. The color was normal now. The feeling had fully returned. No lasting damage. She thought about the garbage bag with her things in it, sitting on the floor by the door. She thought about her winter coat still hanging on the hook by the back door of the house on Callaway Lane. She thought about her notebook under the mattress in the room that was no longer her room, if it had ever truly been. She thought about her father, who had called her mother a night owl when they were all still a family, because Patricia liked to stay up late reading after everyone else had gone to sleep. He had said it fondly, that word, night owl, like it was a good thing. Elena stared at the ceiling. The radiator rattled. She thought about her fingers, the pale, waxy color of them that morning. She had been cold enough for that to happen. She had been cold enough for her own body to start sending emergency signals to her skin, telling it to pull the blood inward, to protect the core, to leave the edges on their own. The edges are on their own, her body had said. Save what you can. She understood that instruction very well. She turned over onto her side and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was manageable. Tomorrow had steps. She would go back to the drop-in center. She would wait for the Harbor House to call. She would go to her shift on Friday and stand at the register and scan groceries and be normal and together and give nothing away. She was very good at giving nothing away. The radiator rattled. She slept. The Harbor House did not look the same in the gray light of a Wednesday morning. Elena had been coming here for 3 days now, not to sleep. She was still at the motel for one more night, and after that she would figure something else out, but to use the address as an anchor point. Gloria had told her she could come in during the day if she needed to. There was a quiet back room with chairs and a table and a coffee maker. Elena had been using it to study and to think. On Wednesday morning she arrived just after 8 and found the front room occupied by someone she had not seen before. An older woman, Elena guessed mid-60s, maybe older, was sitting at the reception desk doing the work of 2 people at once, talking on the phone with one hand and flipping through a stack of folders with the other. She had silver hair cut short and close to her head, and she wore a cardigan with a pattern of small birds on it, and she moved with the efficient calm of someone who had been doing exactly this for a very long time. She looked up when Elena came in, held up one finger, "Wait just a moment," and finished her phone call. "Elena?" she said. "Yes, sorry, I don't think we've met. I'm Odette. I run the evening and overnight side here, but I came in early today because we have a situation." She set the folders down and looked at Elena with an expression that was direct and warm at the same time, which was a combination Elena had rarely encountered and found a little disorienting. Gloria mentioned you'd be coming in. How are you doing? I'm fine, Elena said. It was her default answer. She was aware of its inadequacy, even as she said it. Odette looked at her for a moment, in the way of someone who hears what is said, and also what is not said. Sit down, she said. I'll get you coffee. Real coffee, not the stuff from the machine in the back. I brought a French press. Elena sat down. Odette brought coffee in a proper mug, not a paper cup, and set it in front of her before settling back behind the desk. She did not sit in the way of someone preparing to conduct an interview. She sat in the way of someone who was simply in the same room as you and not going anywhere. The 2-night motel placement is done tomorrow morning, Elena said. I want to know if there's anything I should be doing differently to move up the wait list. You're already doing everything right, Odette said. The list is moving. I won't give you a false date, but it's moving. Elena nodded. She wrapped both hands around the mug. The heat felt important. You're working? Odette asked. Grocery store. Shift this Friday. Good. Keep that. That's important for the transition paperwork later. Odette was making a note. Do you have somewhere to be tonight and tomorrow? Elena thought about this honestly rather than quickly. Tonight I have the motel. Tomorrow I'm not sure. Odette wrote something down. There's a small thing I can do, she said, in the tone of someone who was going to do something kind and wanted to make absolutely no ceremony out of it. The staff break room here, the one in the back, has a small couch. Technically that's for staff use only, but technically I am staff, and technically I say it's fine for you to use it for a few nights while we wait for the list to move, as long as you don't advertise it, because I can't offer that to everyone, and it's not fair to create situations I can't manage. Elena looked at her. You can say no, Odette added. This isn't a condition of anything. The list stays the same either way. Why are you doing this? Elena asked. It was a real question, not a suspicious one. Odette considered it in the way of someone who does not deflect from real questions. Because nobody counts how long the kettle's been boiling, she said simply. You've been dealing with this situation since January 11th. That's 11 days. You've done everything right. You filled out the paperwork, you went to Gloria, you kept your employment. You're maintaining your coursework. You haven't done anything rash or careless. The system has limits. The couch does not. There was a pause. Elena heard the faint sound of someone arriving in the front lobby, and Odette lifting her head slightly in awareness. Thank you, Elena said. The couch has a pillow that needs replacing, but the blanket is good, Odette said, already turning back to her folders. Coffee is available from 6 in the morning. Elena spent the rest of the morning in the back room with her laptop, working on her accounting module quiz. She had 3 days before it opened, but she wanted to be over-prepared. Being over-prepared was one of the tools she had developed over years of having very few other tools available to her. When you could not control the large things in your life, you controlled the small ones with great precision. Around noon, Odette knocked on the back room door and pushed it open slightly. There's someone in the main room you might want to talk to, she said. Her name is Frances. She went through our placement program about 8 months ago. She's come back today to help with some administrative things. I'm not suggesting anything. I just thought, sometimes it helps to talk to someone who has been on the other side of where you're sitting. Elena closed her laptop. Okay. Frances was about 30, with a round, open face and a thick braid over one shoulder. She had brought lunch, a bag with sandwiches from somewhere, which she was setting out on the main table. She looked up when Elena came in and smiled in a way that did not have anything performative about it. You're on the list, Frances said. 11 days and counting. I was on it for 16. Frances pulled out a chair. Sit. Eat. It's just sandwiches, but they're good ones. Elena sat. She took a sandwich. It was on sourdough bread with something green, and something else that she could not immediately identify but that tasted good. What happened to you? Elena asked. She knew it was possibly a forward question, but Frances had the look of someone who did not mind being asked forward questions. Eviction, Frances said without hesitation. Landlord sold the building. 30 days notice in November. I had a daughter and a job and no savings and nowhere to go. She took a bite of her sandwich. It took 16 days to get a bed here. In those 16 days I stayed at my sister's, which was not sustainable. She has 3 kids in a 1-bedroom, and then a friend's couch, and then 2 nights in my car. 2 nights in your car in November, Elena said. November. Frances nodded, which is not as bad as January, but still. The heater only works when the engine's running, and you can't run the engine all night. No, Elena agreed. What happened to you? Frances asked. She said it in the same tone she had used before. Direct. without any excess of sympathy that might make the question feel like a performance. Elena thought about how to answer. She had given the official version to Gloria and to Odette. Factual, complete, without editorial. She gave Francis the same version. Francis listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, Francis was quiet for a moment. "Your dad," she said. "Yes. Not the stepmother, your actual dad." "Yes." Francis looked down at her sandwich for a moment. "That's a different kind of hard," she said. "My landlord was a stranger. He didn't owe me anything beyond what the law required. But your dad is." She paused. "He's my dad," Elena said. "Yeah." Francis looked at her. "That's its own thing." They ate in silence for a moment. The room was warm. Outside, Elena could hear a car going past on the street, and then quiet again. "The worst part," Elena said, and she was surprised to find herself saying it aloud, because she had not planned to, "is that I've spent years making excuses for him. Telling myself he was tired, that he was grieving, that Carol was difficult and he didn't know how to stand in the middle, that he loved me but didn't know how to show it. I had this whole structure of explanations." Francis nodded slowly. "And then the porch light goes off," Elena said. Francis was quiet. "He declined my call," Elena continued. "Not missed it. Declined it. On purpose, with his thumb. He made a choice with his thumb, and then put the phone back in his pocket." She heard the evenness in her own voice, and recognized it as the kind of evenness that comes not from the absence of feeling, but from the decision not to be undone by it. "After all the excuses I made for him, he made a choice with his thumb." "Yes," Francis said. "I thought I was prepared for something like this," Elena said. "I've been preparing for something like this for years, but you can't really prepare for the specific shape it takes." "No," Francis agreed, "you can't." They finished their sandwiches. Francis told her about the next steps she had taken after Harbor House, the job program she had accessed, the subsidized apartment she was in now, the childcare support that had made it possible for her to go back to full-time work. She talked about these things matter-of-factly, as a series of concrete steps rather than as a redemption story. Elena found that easier to listen to than redemption stories, which always had a shape that felt designed to make the listener feel a certain way. Facts were easier than feelings. Facts were something you could write in a notebook and follow. She spent the afternoon studying. She took the quiz practice sections twice each and scored well on both. She had always been good at absorbing information and holding on to it. Her teachers in school had said so. Back when she was young and going to regular school and her teachers said things about her. That had been a long time ago. She had not had teachers who said things about her in quite a while. She had online course instructors who graded her work and occasionally wrote feedback in the comment boxes, and some of them wrote things that were encouraging, but that was different from someone seeing you in a room and saying, "You are good at this." She thought about that gap, the one between being good at something and having someone witness that you were good at it. She thought about how much of her life had been lived inside that gap. At 5 in the afternoon, Odette came in to check on her. "There is one thing I want to mention," Odette said, settling into the chair across from Elena and putting on her reading glasses to look at something on her phone. "Your name came up in a conversation this afternoon. There is a program through the City Housing Authority, not a shelter, actually a small apartment, one room, very basic, that opens up periodically for people in transitional situations. There's a slot that may become available in about 3 weeks. It requires employment verification and a background check, but there are no credit requirements and no deposit." Elena set down her pencil. 3 weeks, she said. "Approximately. It could be sooner. It's not guaranteed, I want to be clear about that. But I've sent your paperwork over as an interested applicant." Odette took off her reading glasses. "I don't do that for everyone. I do it for people who I think will make use of the opportunity if it comes." Elena thought about what that meant. She thought about a room that was hers. Not a cot in a shared space, not a break room couch, not a motel room under an emergency voucher. A room that was hers, with a lock that worked with her key. "Thank you," she said. The words were the same 2 words she had been saying for 11 days. But this time they meant something different. They did not mean thank you for the basics. They meant something closer to, "I see what you are doing and I will not waste it." Odette nodded and put her glasses back on, and went back to whatever she had been looking at on her phone. That night, the break room couch was narrow and the pillow was, as advertised, in need of replacement. Elena folded her jacket and used it as additional padding under the pillow. She lay in the dark and listened to the building settle around her. A radiator somewhere clicked as it cooled. A door closed somewhere deeper in the building. Outside on the street, a dog barked twice and then stopped. She thought about Francis, who had sat in a car for 2 nights in November, and was now in a subsidized apartment with her daughter. She thought about Odette, who had said nobody counts how long the kettle's been boiling, and meant it with the plain certainty of someone who had been counting for a long time. She thought about the one-room apartment that might or might not open in 3 weeks. She thought about her father's thumb. She let herself feel the full weight of that last one for a moment, really feel it, without the structure of excuses, without the comfortable story. Her father had looked at her name on his phone screen and moved his thumb and made a choice. He had made that choice on the night she spent on the porch steps. He had made it the next morning when she texted him. He had made it every time the phone rang and he set it face down. She felt the weight of that. Then she set it aside, not away. Just aside, for tonight. She could not carry the full weight of it every single moment. That was not discipline. That was just physics. She had an accounting quiz in 3 days, and a shift on Friday, and a wait list she was moving up, and a possible apartment in 3 weeks. Those were the things she could act on. She closed her eyes. Somewhere in the building, Odette was still working. Elena could hear the faint sound of a keyboard, deliberate and steady, the typing of someone who had a great deal left to do, and every intention of doing it. The sound was, improbably, comforting. Elena let it carry her to sleep. She dreamed of her mother's kitchen, the clean countertops, the cabinet with the paper taped inside it, the phone numbers, written in blue ink, for the people who mattered, the morning light coming through the window above the sink and laying itself across the floor in a long yellow rectangle. She dreamed of her mother standing at the stove, her back to Elena, her hair the dark brown that Elena had spent most of her life wishing she had inherited. Her mother turned around in the dream, and she was holding a mug, and she said something that Elena could not quite hear but that felt important, the way things in dreams often feel important without your being able to say exactly why. Elena reached for the mug. She woke up. The break room was dark and quiet. The clock on the wall said 2:47 a.m. She lay there for a moment, in the particular stillness of being awake in the middle of the night, and she thought about the dream. She did not try to interpret it. She had never been a person who believed that dreams carried specific messages, but she held the feeling of the dream carefully, the warmth and the yellow light and the sense of her mother being present, and she let it sit with her for a minute, before it faded. Then she turned over on the narrow couch and went back to sleep. In the morning there would be coffee. In the morning there would be steps. In the morning there would be something to do with her hands, and doing things with her hands had always been the way she had gotten through everything that mattered. She slept without dreaming for the rest of the night, deeply and completely, the way people sleep when they have been cold for a long time, and have finally, for one night at least, found somewhere warm. The hardware store was called Hales. It sat on the corner of Drummond Street and 5th, between a dry cleaner and a place that sold frames for photographs, and it had the look of a store that had been there long enough to belong to the street rather than simply occupy it. The sign above the door was painted wood, dark green with gold letters, that had been touched up at some point but not replaced. The display window held a careful arrangement of tools, a level, some drill bits in a neat row, a pair of work gloves, that someone had put there with genuine thought about how to arrange them. Elena had walked past it twice before she stopped. She had been walking a lot in the past 2 weeks. Walking was free, and it kept her warm when the drop-in center was closed and the break room was not available, and it gave her a way to think. She had learned the city differently in these weeks, not as a series of routes between her house and her job and the grocery store, but as a collection of warm and not warm places, open and closed, options and not options. She had walked past the window display at Hales Hardware on Monday and again on Tuesday. On Tuesday she had also noticed a small sign, hand-lettered in blue marker on an index card, taped to the inside of the glass. It said, "Help wanted, part-time, cash daily if needed." She stood on the sidewalk and looked at the sign, "Cash daily." That was the part that caught her attention. She had been paid at the grocery store 3 days ago, and the next check was 11 days out. She had $23 left. She had been calculating everything with the precision of someone who has learned that $23 is not $22, and $22 is not $21, and every dollar is a decision. She pushed open the door. A bell above the door rang. The store inside was larger than it looked from the street, with aisles running back into a depth that was hard to gauge from the entrance. The shelves were full but organized, each section labeled in a clean handwriting that matched the sign in the window. The floor was concrete, swept and functional. The whole place had the particular smell of hardware stores, metal and oil and dry wood, that Elena had always found strangely pleasant in the way of smells that are exactly what they are supposed to be. Behind the counter at the back, a man was looking at something on a clipboard. He was about 30-something, tall, with a build that came from actual work rather than the gym, shoulders that said he had been lifting things for years rather than that he had been trying to. He had dark hair, a little long at the back, and a jawline that had not been shaved in 2 or 3 days. He was wearing a dark gray shirt with the sleeves pushed up and work boots that had seen a significant amount of real work. He looked up when she came in. He had steady eyes, brown, level, the kind of eyes that take things in without making a performance of doing so. "Help you find something?" he said. "Actually, I'm here about the sign," Elena said. "In the window. Part-time." He looked at her for a moment. Not evaluatively. Exactly. Just the way someone looks when they are actually listening to what you said, rather than preparing their response while you are still saying it. "You have any experience with retail or inventory?" he asked. 14 months at a grocery store. Stocking shelves, register, inventory counts. I also have some background in accounting. I'm working toward a business certificate online. "How many hours are you available?" "Most days. I have a shift commitment at the grocery store on Fridays and occasional Saturdays. Everything else is flexible." He nodded. He set the clipboard down. "I'm Marcus," he said. "It's my store. You'd be helping with stocking, receiving deliveries, basic customer service, and I need someone who can do a monthly inventory count and catch the errors before I have to deal with them." "I can do all of that," Elena said. "The inventory counting is probably the part I'm best at." Marcus looked at her again, in that same level, unhurried way. "Can you start today?" he said. She started that day. He put her to work in the back receiving area first, logging a delivery of hardware that had arrived that morning, and cross-referencing it against the order sheet. She did this carefully and caught 2 discrepancies in the first pass: a set of drill bits that was listed as 12 units but had arrived as 10, and a box of screws that had been labeled incorrectly on the invoice. She noted both discrepancies, double-checked them, and brought the sheet to Marcus. He looked at it for a moment. "Good," he said. It was one word, said without emphasis, and it was the most genuine piece of praise Elena could remember receiving in recent memory, because it was said in the exact same tone as everything else he said, and therefore could not be mistaken for performance. She spent the rest of the afternoon stocking shelves. She worked methodically, filling from the back, rotating older stock forward the way she had been taught at the grocery store. She organized the drill bit section, which had gotten slightly disordered, and straightened the labels on the hardware drawers along the far wall. She did not talk much, neither did Marcus. The few customers who came in that afternoon were the kinds of people who come to hardware stores in the middle of a Tuesday in January. Contractors with lists, homeowners with specific problems, one older man who came in for a particular type of bolt and spent about 15 minutes having a conversation with Marcus about the best way to fix a fence gate that had been giving him trouble since October. Marcus listened to the full explanation before he answered. He asked 1 or 2 clarifying questions. Then he told the man exactly what he needed, found it from a bin near the counter, and charged him $2.60. The man left very satisfied. Elena watched this exchange from the aisle where she was working, and thought about the difference between someone who does their job and someone who does their job in a way that is actually useful to other people. At the end of the day, Marcus came to find her in the back where she was finishing a count of the paint supplies. "I said cash daily if needed," he said. "Do you need it today, or would you rather take the week's pay at the end?" Elena looked at him. The question was asked without any particular weight to it, but it was the kind of question that required an honest answer. "Today would be helpful," she said. He went to the register and came back with bills, her hours, counted at the rate he had told her in the afternoon, clean and correct. He handed them over without making her feel that there was anything about the transaction to be uncomfortable about. "Same time tomorrow?" he said. "Yes," she said. She walked back to the harbor house that evening with cash in her jacket pocket. Not a lot of cash, but real cash, from real work done that day, and that distinction mattered to her in a way that was hard to explain but impossible to ignore. The second day was the day he noticed her hand. She had forgotten about it, partly because the frost nip had resolved almost completely by now, and partly because she had grown very good at not drawing attention to the things that were wrong with her. But she was lifting a box of mixed fasteners in the morning, a heavy box, the kind that required both hands and a careful grip, and she set it down on the shelf and flexed her fingers afterward the way you do when something has been taxed, and Marcus was coming around the end of the aisle at that moment and saw. He did not say anything. She thought perhaps he had not noticed, or that if he had filed it under Not My Business, which was a filing system she respected. At noon, she went to the break room in the back, A small space with a folding table and a chair and a coffee machine that was older than she was, to eat the lunch she had brought from the drop-in center. When she came back out to the floor, there was a pair of work gloves on the shelf next to where she was going to be working. They were a small size, lined, with a thermal rating on the tag. The tag had been left on. She looked at them for a moment. Marcus was at the other end of the store, explaining something to a man who had come in about pipe fittings. His back was to her. He was talking about pipe fittings with his full attention, the way he did everything. Elena picked up the gloves and put them in her coat pocket. She went back to work. She thought about what that gesture meant. She had known enough people in her life to recognize the difference between the kind of help that wants something in return, attention, gratitude, acknowledgement, the social currency of having been seen being kind, and the kind of help that simply resolves a problem and asks nothing. Her mother had been the second kind. Gloria at the Harbor House was the second kind. Odette was the second kind. Marcus, apparently, was also the second kind. She worked through the afternoon without mentioning the gloves. Marcus did not mention them either. He called it shop policy, which she found out almost immediately was not a real policy, because there was no policy board or signage anywhere in the store that said anything about gloves. She did not point this out. She simply wore the gloves and found that the cold in the building, the back storage area, was poorly heated and stayed at about 55 degrees all day, no longer worked its way into her fingers the way it had been doing. By the end of the second day, Marcus had added a second task to her responsibilities, updating the store's inventory tracking spreadsheet, which had been maintained in a way that Elena described to herself privately as enthusiastic but not precise. She spent the last hour of the day cleaning it up, standardizing the format, correcting the formulas that were not working as intended. "You don't have to do all of that today," Marcus said, coming to look over her shoulder at the screen. "It's easier to do it right once than to fix it every time," Elena said. He made a sound that was not quite a word but that clearly meant, fair point. On the third day, something shifted slightly. She had been stocking the fastener section, a section she had reorganized from scratch over the first 2 days, because the original organization made no logical sense. When Marcus appeared at the end of the aisle carrying 2 mugs, he set one down on the shelf near her without comment. She picked it up. It was coffee, made properly, not from the ancient machine in the break room but clearly from somewhere else. She took a sip. It was very good. "There's a place 2 doors down," he said, already turning to walk back toward the counter. "Thank you," she said. He lifted one hand briefly in acknowledgement without turning around. They had lunch at the same time that day. She at the folding table in the break room, he standing at the counter where he could see the door, eating a sandwich he had brought from home in a reusable container. He came back to refill his coffee at the same time she was returning from the break room, and they ended up standing in the aisle near the power tools for a few minutes in a way that was not quite a conversation, but was also not the absence of one. "You're studying accounting?" he said. He had remembered this from her introduction 2 days earlier. "Business certificate," she said. "Accounting module right now. I have a quiz next Monday. How's it going?" "Well, I think." She paused. "I scored 94 on the practice version this morning." "That's well," he said. "It's the area where there's one right answer," she said. "I find that easier than the areas where there's judgment involved." He considered this. "Because the one right answer is findable." "Yes." He nodded. He went back to the counter. She went back to the fasteners. The conversation had been exactly 6 exchanges long, but it had been a real conversation, the kind where both people were actually inside it, rather than performing the motions of being inside it. She thought about that on the walk back to Harbor House that evening. She thought about Marcus, the gloves on the shelf, the 2 mugs, the way he asked questions like he actually wanted the answers. She thought about his sister, though she did not know about his sister yet. She would not know about his sister for weeks. Right now she knew only the store and the man who ran it and the way that store felt, like somewhere that took its work seriously, like somewhere things were done with care, like somewhere that knew what it was and saw no reason to be anything else. She had spent 13 years in a house that did not know what it was. The difference was so clear it almost hurt to stand next to it. At the Harbor House that evening, Odette told her that the bed situation might move sooner than expected. One of the residents had found placement through the city housing program and would be leaving at the end of the week. Odette could not promise it. There were protocols, a formal process, but she thought Elena should know. Elena thanked her and went to the break room to study for her quiz. She scored 97 on the second practice run. She closed the laptop and lay down on the narrow couch in the dark and thought about what a 97 meant. It meant she knew the material. It meant she had been paying attention. It meant that in the middle of everything that had been happening to her life, the part of her that was building something for the future had not stopped working. She thought about the one right answer, the way Marcus had understood immediately what she meant by it. Not just understood, the way he had found it interesting. The slight shift in his attention when she said it that told her she had said something he was actually thinking about. She had not had a conversation like that in a long time. A conversation where something she said was actually heard. The store bell rang in her mind as she drifted toward sleep. The clean sound of it, nothing fancy, just a bell doing exactly what a bell is supposed to do, telling you someone is coming in. She was very tired. She slept. The key was on the counter when she came in on Thursday morning. It was a plain brass key on a plain ring, with a small cardboard tag attached to it. The tag said, "Apt above, use the back stairs." Marcus was already behind the counter sorting invoices, and he did not look up when Elena came in. She stopped. She looked at the key. She looked at Marcus. He was still looking at the invoices, working through them with the same unhurried precision he brought to everything. "Marcus," she said. He looked up. She did not know how to ask the question she wanted to ask, which was, "How did you know?" Because she had not told him. She had not told anyone at the store. She had shown up every day in the same clean clothes. She had found a laundromat 2 blocks from the harbor house that she had been using every other day to keep her small collection of clothes presentable, and she had done her work and she had not offered anything about her situation that had not been directly asked. He had not asked. He had noticed. She understood this later, working through it in her mind. The same jacket every day. The careful way she kept her section of the break room. Organized, tidy, but also slightly too careful. The way people keep spaces they know are borrowed. The fact that she always arrived exactly on time, never a few minutes early, and never a minute late, suggesting she had been waiting somewhere nearby, rather than coming from a home with the usual comfortable margin. The lunch she brought, always from the same place, the drop-in center on Fletcher Street, which was not the kind of place you went for lunch if you had a kitchen. He had looked at these things and read them, the way a person reads a combination of facts and arrives at the most reasonable explanation. "The apartment above the store is empty," he said. "The furnace is old, but it works. I've been meaning to rent it, but I haven't gotten to the paperwork." He paused. "You'd be doing me a favor, honestly. An empty apartment above a store in winter is a structural problem. Pipes need someone around." Elena looked at the key. She had no idea how to accept this. She had gotten fairly good at accepting help from institutions. From Gloria, from Odette, from the city housing program, from Donna at the drop-in center. That was different. Those were systems. This was a person. "Why?" she said. She had asked this question before, of Odette, and Odette had given her an answer about kettles. She needed Marcus to give her his own answer, the real one, not a deflection. He was quiet for a moment. He turned the invoice in his hand over once. "Because someone should have done this a long time ago," he said. He said it flatly, without drama, without the air of someone who is presenting their own generosity to be admired. He said it the way you say something that is simply true, and that you are not interested in discussing at length. Elena picked up the key. She looked at it in her hand. The brass was cold. Her fingers closed around it. She felt the weight of it, almost nothing, a few grams at most, and understood that what it weighed in reality had nothing to do with what it meant. "Thank you," she said. He had already looked back at the invoices. She went to work. The apartment above the store was accessed by a narrow staircase that went up from the back alley, not the back room of the store, but the outside alley, through a door in the brick wall. Elena went up during her lunch break to look at it. She climbed a flight of stairs with a metal railing, opened the door at the top and stepped inside. It was one large room with a small bathroom off the side and an alcove that had been intended as a kitchen, with a counter and a deep sink and a mini refrigerator that hummed quietly when she turned it on. The main room had a window on the south wall that looked down onto Drummond Street, and a window on the east wall that showed the side of the dry cleaner next door, and a narrow strip of sky. The floor was wooden and clean. The walls were white and undecorated. The bed was a twin with a metal frame and a bare mattress. There was a folding chair and nothing else. The furnace was in the corner, as Marcus had said. Old, yes. But when she turned the dial, it clicked 3 times, and then lit with a steady blue light, and began, almost immediately, to produce warmth. She stood in the middle of the empty room while the warmth came up around her. She did not have words for what she felt. She did not try to find them. She stood there and felt it directly, without translation. Then she went back downstairs and finished her shift. She moved in that evening. There was not much to move. The garbage bag Carol had set on the porch 3 weeks ago was still the full inventory of what she owned in the world. Some clothes, the laptop, the charger, the toiletries, the one textbook. She carried it up the back stairs in one trip. She set the bag on the floor. She sat on the edge of the bare mattress. The furnace ticked and hummed in the corner. The window showed the streetlights coming on along Drummond Street as the evening settled in. A car went past below, its headlight sweeping across the ceiling for a second before moving on. She still did not have her winter coat. She did not have her notebook or the cash envelope from her room at Callaway Lane. She did not have most of what she owned, because those things were still in a house she could not get into. But she had a room, with a furnace, and a lock, and a key that worked. She texted Odette to let her know she had found a place to stay, and to ask whether she should remain on the Harbor House list as a precaution, or whether she should free up the spot. Odette replied within a few minutes, "Free it up, but I have your information if you ever need it." Then a second message, "Well done." Elena held the phone for a moment. She wrote 2 words back, "Thank you." It was not enough, but it was all the language available. She spent the first evening organizing what she had, which did not take long given how little it was. She washed what needed washing in the bathroom sink. She arranged her textbooks and laptop on the counter in the kitchen alcove. She charged her phone. She sat by the window for a while and looked at Drummond Street, and watched the few people who were out in the January evening, moving with their heads down against the cold. She thought about calling her father again. She got as far as opening her contacts and looking at his name. Then she closed the app. Not because she was angry, though she was. Not because she had nothing to say, though she was not sure she had the right words yet. But because she had learned something important in the past 3 weeks, and the learning had been expensive, and she did not want to give it up before she had fully absorbed it. The lesson was this: not every closed door was hers to open. Some doors were closed by other people for their own reasons, and the work of standing outside and knocking was not her work to do indefinitely. She had knocked, she had called, she had texted. She had demonstrated in every way available to her that she was here, that she existed, that she mattered, or at the very least that she required a response. He had read the messages. He had made his thumb move. She had stopped, and that had been the right thing to stop. Over the next 2 weeks, a kind of shape formed. Elena's mornings began at 6:30. She made coffee with the small coffee maker she bought at a charity shop for $4, the first purchase she made with her Hales pay beyond food. She studied for an hour before going downstairs to the store. Marcus opened at 8. She was usually there by 7:50. They worked well together in the particular way of 2 people who are both, fundamentally, people who work. Not people who perform work. Not people who talk about working. People who simply do it, steadily, without requiring the doing to be observed in order for it to count. She passed her accounting quiz, 92. She enrolled in the next module, which was business law. She found it harder than accounting, because business law was full of the areas where there were multiple defensible answers, which she had told Marcus she found more difficult. The next time she mentioned the quiz, Marcus surprised her by pulling a business law textbook from the shelf in the break room, one of several books that lived there, with the comfortable accumulation of things that have been set down and never quite picked up, and telling her that the chapter on contract formation was the one that gave most people the most trouble. She looked at the book. It was dog-eared at multiple chapters. "You studied this?" she said. "The store is a business," he said. He took his coffee and went back to the counter. She read the chapter. He was right about contract formation. The days were quiet in the way of days that are building towards something without announcing it. Marcus was not a talker. She was not a talker. But there were conversations, brief and real, that appeared in the gaps between other things. A customer would come in and leave, and in the moment before the next customer, one of them would say something and the other would answer, and it would be a real exchange, the kind where both people are changed slightly by what was said. She told him about Frances, the woman she had met at Harbor House. He listened. He told her, in the form of a fact, simply stated, that the pipes in the apartment above the store had frozen 2 winters ago, and that he had replaced 3 of them, but the 4th was still original, and might need attention before the end of the season. She said she would keep an eye on the temperature in the bathroom, where the original pipe ran. He said that was good. He did not tell her about Renee, not yet. She did not know yet that there was a Renee to know about. She knew only that Marcus had a particular quality of attention around certain things, around homelessness, around young women in difficulty, around the specific subject of being left out in the cold, a quality that was not pity and not sympathy but something more like, "I know what this is," without the explanation that would follow that sentence in someone else's mouth. She noticed this without being able to name it. The apartment became her apartment in the gradual way that places become yours, by the accumulation of small habits. She made the bed a certain way. She put her mug on the left side of the counter, because that was where she reached for it first. She taped a piece of paper inside the kitchen cabinet with the phone numbers she needed to remember, her mother's habit. The first time she noticed she had done it, she stood with her hand on the cabinet door for a moment. Then she closed the cabinet and went back to her studying. On the 22nd day of January, exactly 11 days after she had stood on the porch steps in the cold and been locked out, she was behind the counter for the first time, covering while Marcus went to pick up a parts order from the supplier. A woman came in looking for a specific type of door hinge for an old farmhouse door. Elena had spent 2 weeks learning the stock. She found the right hinge on the third try, cross-referencing the size the woman had measured against the inventory system Elena had reorganized. The woman paid and left and said, "That was very efficient, thank you." Elena said, "You're welcome. Good luck with the door." And then she stood behind the counter and looked at the store, at the clean aisles, the organized shelves, the labeled sections, and felt something that she had not felt in a very long time. She felt at home somewhere. Not permanently. Not yet. But for right now, in this moment, in this warm and functional and quietly purposeful place, she was where she was supposed to be. The bell above the door rang. Another customer came in. She looked up. She smiled. She said, "Help you find something?" It was not a complicated life. It was not the life she had imagined for herself when she was young, and imagined lives. But it was real. It was hers. It was built from the ground up, with her own hands, from the wreckage of a night on a cold porch in January. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, quite a lot. She helped the customer find a box of wall anchors and a level and 2 types of screws. She rang them up correctly on the first try. She said, "Have a good afternoon." The bell rang again when they left. She went back to work. The text came on a Thursday afternoon while Elena was counting a bin of assorted wing nuts. She had developed a method for counting small hardware, a mental grouping system, 5s and 10s, that let her run through a bin quickly and accurately without losing track. She was on her third pass when her phone buzzed on the shelf where she had set it. She finished the count, 340 wing nuts. She wrote the number on the inventory sheet. Then she picked up her phone. It was her half-sister, Mia. Elena had not heard from Mia since before January 11th. Mia was 18, and the two of them had never been close in the way that step-siblings sometimes manage to be, the way that requires at least one person to work at it, and neither of them had ever quite gotten there. Mia was not cruel. She was not unkind. She was simply someone who had grown up in the same house as Elena, and had learned from the atmosphere of that house that Elena was adjacent to the family rather than inside it, and she had never questioned that arrangement. The text said, "Mom says you were lying about everything to get sympathy." Elena read it once, then again. She set the phone face down on the shelf. She picked up the inventory sheet and continued to the next bin. Her father called 11 minutes later. She knew it was him because her phone buzzed again, and she looked at the screen before she could stop herself, the way you look at something you know you should not but cannot quite keep yourself from. She set it face down again without answering. He called twice more before 5 o'clock. She did not answer either call. Marcus was in the back room doing paperwork. He came out once during this period to check on a delivery tracking number and glanced at her once, briefly, in the way of someone who observes without intruding. He went back to the paperwork. At 5 o'clock, when Elena was done with her shift and Marcus was locking the front door, she was still holding the inventory sheet, sitting on the stool behind the counter, staring at the middle distance with the expression of someone who was working very hard to process something in a controlled manner. "Take the rest of the day," Marcus said, though it was 5, and the rest of the day was effectively over. It was the kind of thing you say when you mean something else. "I'm fine," she said. He looked at her. She looked at the inventory sheet. "My father called," she said, "and my sister. They're saying I was lying about what happened in January." There was a pause. "About being locked out," she added. "About the cold. About the whole." She stopped. Marcus set the keys down on the counter. He did not sit down. He simply stood there, on his side of the counter, giving the moment its proper space. "What do you want to do about it?" he said. She thought about this. It was a more useful question than any of the things she had expected him to say. The reassurances, the suggestions, the opinions about who was right. He had asked what she wanted to do, which implied that the choice was hers, and that he was not going to make it for her. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. He nodded. He picked up his keys. He went back to the paperwork. She sat on the stool for another 10 minutes. Then she went upstairs. In the apartment, She sat by the window and looked at Drummond Street and thought about what it meant to be called a liar, about the thing that had actually happened to you. She thought about Carol, who had changed the lock and set a garbage bag on the porch, and then told her husband that none of it had been as serious as Elena claimed. She thought about how simple that story was, how much easier it was than the truth, how it required no examination of anyone's choices, how it allowed everything to remain exactly as it had always been. She thought about her father, who had made his choice with his thumb and then needed a story that made that choice acceptable to himself. She thought about Mia, who had sent that message without a question mark, without any curiosity about whether it was true. She thought about her winter coat, still hanging on the hook by the back door of that house. She thought about her notebook, under the mattress. She thought about the $12 in the cash envelope. She thought about all of these things sitting inside a locked house on Callaway Lane, in the possession of people who were now telling each other that Elena had made it up. She picked up her phone. She called her father. He answered on the second ring. She had not expected that. She had prepared for voicemail. The surprise of his voice made her pause for exactly 1 second, and then she recovered herself. "Dad," she said. "Elena." His voice had the quality it always had when he was not quite comfortable. A flatness that was not calm but was working very hard to look like calm. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know," she said. "I saw. We need to talk about what you've been telling people." She thought about the word we. She thought about how smoothly he had always used it, that word, to mean himself and Carol, to mean the unit that had never quite included Elena. "I haven't been telling people anything," she said. "I've been asking for help because I needed it. I was locked out of the house. The lock was changed while I was at work. I had to get resources from a shelter organization because I had nowhere to go." That's not how Carol describes it. "I know it isn't," Elena said. Silence. "She says you've been telling people we threw you out in the cold." "I was thrown out in the cold," Elena said. She kept her voice the same, not louder, not harder, exactly the same as it had been when she started. "In January, 14 degrees. I had frostbite on 2 of my fingers. I spent the night in a community center on a cot. I was on a shelter wait list for nearly 2 weeks." She paused. "Those are facts, Dad. I'm not framing them. They are just what happened." Another silence. Longer this time. "You should have called me," he said. Elena closed her eyes for 1 moment. She opened them. "I called you 6 times the night it happened," she said. "You declined the last call, after you had already read the texts." She heard him exhale slowly. "That's not," he started. "I'm not asking you to agree with me," she said. "I'm not asking you to apologize right now. I'm asking you to understand that I'm not lying about what happened, and I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just telling you what is true." She paused. "And I would like my coat, and my notebook, the green one I kept under my mattress, and the envelope in my desk drawer." More silence. "I'll have Mia bring them to you," he said finally. "Okay," Elena said. "Thank you." She ended the call. She sat with the phone in her hands for a while. She looked at the streetlights outside. A pigeon walked along the ledge of the building across the street in the unruffled way that pigeons have, as though the cold were simply part of the landscape and not a condition requiring adjustment. She thought about whether she felt better. She did, in a way. Not the kind of better that comes from resolution, because nothing had been resolved, but the kind of better that comes from having said true things out loud in the presence of the person who most needed to hear them. She had been carrying those truths carefully for weeks, keeping them intact by not exposing them too often. It had been necessary work, but it had also been tiring in a way she had not fully noticed until she set some of it down. She was angry. She was aware of this. The anger was not the white-hot kind. It was the slower kind, the kind that had been accumulating for years and had finally run out of places to put itself. It was the anger of someone who had made excuses for another person for a very long time, and had finally, with great clarity, stopped. She did not do anything with the anger that evening. She let it be there and went about the rest of the evening as usual. She made dinner. She had a hot plate now, another charity shop acquisition, and she was working her way through the most basic cooking skills with the thoroughness she brought to everything. And she ate and washed the single pan and sat down with her laptop. She had a business law assignment due at the end of the week. She worked on it for 2 hours. She ate an apple. She charged her phone. At 9 o'clock, Mia texted her. The text said, "I'm outside the store." Elena looked at the text. She looked at the time. She pulled on her jacket and went downstairs and around to the alley entrance and through the front of the store, which she unlocked with her key, and stepped outside. Mia was standing on the sidewalk in front of the store. She was wearing a good coat, The kind that Carol bought for her children that Elena had never had. And she was holding a bag. A real bag, not a garbage bag. A canvas tote with handles. Through the sides of it, Elena could see the green spine of her notebook. Mia held the bag out. Elena took it. Mia was 18, and she had her mother's way of looking past things rather than at them, but tonight she was looking directly at Elena. She looked younger than 18 and older than 18 at the same time, in the way of someone who has recently learned something that has changed the dimensions of their world. "It's all there," Mia said. "Your coat, the notebook, the envelope, your other things from the room." "Thank you," Elena said. There was a pause. On Drummond Street, a car went past. "I didn't know," Mia said. Then she stopped. Elena looked at her. "I didn't know about the shelter," Mia said. "About all of it. I knew." She paused again. "I knew you were gone. Mom said you'd gone to stay with a friend. I didn't ask." Elena waited. "I should have asked," Mia said. It was not much. It was not the full accounting that honesty required. But it was something, and Elena could see that it had cost Mia something to say it. Not the most it could have cost someone, but something. "Yes," Elena said simply. She did not say it was okay, because it was not yet okay, and she had promised herself she would not use those words in situations where they were not yet true. Mia nodded. She looked at the store, the dark windows, the green sign, the display in the window. "Is this where you work?" she said. "Yes." Another pause. Mia looked at the sidewalk. "You could have called me. In January. I have a phone." "I called Dad," Elena said. 6 times. Mia absorbed this. Elena watched her absorb it, watched the information land and then move through her and settle somewhere it would have to be dealt with later. "I know," Mia said finally. Elena zipped up her jacket against the cold. "I have to get back inside," she said. "Thank you for bringing these." "Yeah," Mia said. "Okay." She started to walk toward the street. Then she stopped and turned back. "Elena," she said. Elena waited. "Are you okay? Right now, I mean. Do you have what you need?" Elena thought about the apartment upstairs, the furnace, the coffee maker, the hot plate, the accounting quiz she had passed with a 92, the inventory she had reorganized, the key on its ring. "Yes," she said. "I'm okay." Mia held her gaze for a moment. Something moved across her face that Elena could not name. Then she nodded, pulled her coat tighter, and walked away. Elena stood on the sidewalk until Mia turned the corner. Then she went back inside and locked the door behind her. She set the canvas bag on the break room table and took out the notebook first. It was exactly as she had left it. Green cover, slightly dog-eared at the corners, the pen still clipped to the front. She flipped through the pages. Her course records, her grades. The plan, laid out in her own handwriting step by step, in the precise way she had always done things. She had not been able to add anything to it in the past 5.5 weeks. She found the last entry, the week before January 11th, and she sat down with the pen and wrote today's date above the next line. She wrote, "Apartment, Hales Hardware, Drummond Street. Business law due Friday. Quiz next Monday. Winter coat recovered." She wrote, "Things are better than they were." She closed the notebook. She went upstairs to the apartment. The furnace was running. The room was warm. Outside the window, the city was doing what cities do at night, moving and lit and indifferent to any one person's circumstances in the way that is sometimes devastating and sometimes honestly a relief. She put the notebook on the counter next to her laptop. She put on her winter coat, just to feel it, the weight of it across her shoulders, the broken zipper that still needed fixing. She stood there in the warm room in her winter coat for a moment. Then she took it off and hung it on the hook by the door. She went to bed. She did not dream about anything she remembered. It was a Tuesday in February, and the window latch had been broken for 6 weeks. Marcus had been meaning to fix it since before Christmas. It was the window at the south end of the store, the one that rattled when the wind came from the east, which in February it did almost constantly. He had the parts for it. He simply had not gotten around to it, in the way that people who are very good at fixing things for other people sometimes let the things in their own immediate environment go too long without attention. He was crouching at the window with a screwdriver at 5:30 on a Tuesday, after the last customer had left, and while Elena was at the counter working through the closing inventory count. The store was quiet in the particular way it was always quiet in those last half hours, the day's business done, the work of the next day not yet started, just the hum of the fluorescent light above the register, and the occasional sound of Marcus's screwdriver finding or losing its grip. Elena was counting a section of the drawer pulls. She was on the second pass. Marcus was replacing the mounting bracket on the window latch. He had the window frame partially disassembled, which required him to hold 3 things in position simultaneously while working with a 4th. He had done this before and knew the sequence. He worked through it without hurry. The store was warm. Outside, the wind moved down Drummond Street and the bare trees along the sidewalk moved with it. He had been thinking about Renee for the past several days. This happened sometimes, in no particular pattern that he had ever been able to identify. It was not always triggered by an obvious thing. Sometimes it was a season. Late fall and deep winter were the seasons that carried the most weight. Sometimes it was a person. Sometimes it was just the absence of any particular cause, the brain finding its way back to the thing it most needed and least wanted to think about. He fitted the new bracket into position. He held it there with his left hand and picked up the screwdriver with his right. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said from the counter. "Yes," Marcus said without turning around. "In January, the night I came in about the job, you looked at my hand." He kept working. "Yes. You didn't say anything about it until the gloves." "No," he said. "Why the gloves instead of just asking?" He found the first screw hole. He started the screw. "Asking makes someone explain themselves," he said. "Gloves just fix the problem." He heard her stop writing. A pause and the scratch of the pencil. "That's a very specific philosophy," she said. "It works," he said. The first screw went in. He started the second. There was a pause in the room, not uncomfortable. The kind of pause that sits between 2 sentences that are going somewhere. "You've seen this before," Elena said. It was not quite a question. He finished the second screw. He tested the bracket. It held. He began to reassemble the latch mechanism. He thought about how to answer. He had been asked things before, by people who meant well, who wanted to understand what had shaped him, and he had given those people whatever version of the answer required the least from him and from them. He had gotten efficient at it. A story compressed to its headline, a fact with no context. He thought about Elena, who answered questions precisely and expected the same in return, who had told him things about herself without embellishment and without performance, not to create an effect, but because they were true and relevant. He thought about what she had said about the one right answer and how she found it easier than the areas where judgment was involved. Renee was not a question with a one right answer. She was a question with a lot of wrong ones and one truth that was simply the truth, without comfort. He set the screwdriver on the windowsill. "My sister," he said. Elena did not respond. He had learned over weeks of working alongside her that her silences were not absences. They were the space she gave things to come in. "Her name was Renee," he said. "She was 19. This was 7 years ago, late November. She had been having problems, a difficult situation with someone she was staying with, and she ended up outside his apartment in the cold for several hours. Nobody came. She did not call me. I did not know. By the time someone found her," he stopped. He picked the screwdriver back up and drove the last screw for the latch housing. He tested it. The window locked cleanly. "She died," he said. The screwdriver went back in his pocket. He stood up and faced the window for a moment, looking at the street through it. The latch worked. It would not rattle anymore. "I'm sorry," Elena said. He turned around. Elena was looking at him from the counter. She was not looking at him with the particular expression that people use when they are about to say something designed to help, the expression that is actually about their own discomfort with the fact of loss. She was looking at him the way she looked at things she was working to understand. "After that," he said, "I started noticing. The signs, the jacket that is not warm enough for the temperature, the way people stand at the edge of spaces like they are not sure they are allowed to be in them, the careful way someone eats a meal that they know they cannot afford to waste." He paused. "I noticed you the morning you came in about the sign. I noticed before you told me anything." Elena was quiet. "I don't do this because I feel guilty about Renee," he said, because he had thought about that specific question many times and wanted to be precise about it. "Guilt would mean I believe I could have prevented it by doing more. I don't know that. I'll never know that. What I know is that she was outside in the cold and nobody came." He met her eyes. "I know what that is. I can do something about the version of it that's in front of me, so I do." There was a long pause. "You've been doing this for 7 years, Elena said. It was the same thing she had said to him before, that afternoon weeks ago when she had first begun to understand the shape of him, but she said it differently now, not as a question, as a recognition. "Yes," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back down at her inventory sheet. "Renee," she said. She said the name once, quietly, as if placing it somewhere careful. Then she picked up her pencil and went back to the count. It was exactly the right thing to do. He picked up his toolbox and went back to the break room. He had told 2 other people about Renee in 7 years. One was the therapist he had seen for 8 months after she died, who had helped him understand the difference between grief and guilt and why it mattered to know which one he was carrying. The other was a neighbor, old Mrs. Calloway, who had asked him once why he was always fixing things for people who didn't ask, and he had told her, and she had nodded and said, "That sounds right," and had gone back inside. He had not told anyone who knew Renee. He had not told his mother, who was still alive and living with her sister in another part of the state and who dealt with Renee's death by not discussing it, by which Marcus understood she was dealing with it in the only way she knew how. He had not told any of his friends from before the hardware store, most of whom he had slowly stopped seeing because they were in a part of his life that was before, and he was now firmly in the after. He set the toolbox down in the break room. He sat down in the folding chair and drank the last of his afternoon coffee, which was cold. He thought about the fact that he had just told Elena. He thought about why it had been easy. Not painless. It was never painless, that particular telling, but easy in the sense of natural, without the effort that usually went into it. He thought about the quality of her listening, which was like the quality of everything else she did. Precise, full, not performing attention but actually paying it. He thought about the moment when she said the name, Renee, once, quietly. He had not expected that. He had expected the expressions, the empathy that is really about discomfort, the suggestions, the questions that are really about curiosity. He had not expected someone to simply say the name once and then return to work, as if to say, "I have placed this where it belongs, and will not treat it as a curiosity." He finished the cold coffee. He went back out to the floor. Elena had finished the count. She was writing the totals on the summary sheet in her neat, exact handwriting. 11 short on the M6 bolts, she said. "We should reorder before the weekend." "Add it to the order," he said. She made a note. He went to the register to run the day's closing reconciliation. They worked on opposite ends of the store, each in their own task, and the room was quiet with the particular quality of shared quiet between 2 people who are both comfortable in it. He thought about Renee walking along a street in late November, 7 years ago, with nowhere to go and no one coming. He thought about Elena on the porch steps in January with the lock changed. He thought about the distance between those 2 nights and the difference between them, one that ended in loss and one that was still going forward, and he thought about how much of that difference came down to nothing more than who happened to be watching. Whether the right person was looking, whether someone with the specific knowledge of what cold looks like on a person was standing in the right place at the right time. He thought about luck. He had spent a lot of time over 7 years thinking about luck, and whether it was a word that meant anything, and what you did with the fact that the same night could go 100 different ways depending on 100 things that had nothing to do with the person who was cold. He did not have a resolution to this question. He suspected he never would. What he had instead was the store and the gloves on the shelf and the key on the counter, the specific actions available to him in the specific circumstances he occupied, and the choice to use them. He finished the reconciliation. It balanced on the first check. He printed the tape. Elena was putting on her jacket. "See you tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," he said. She went out. The bell rang above the door. He locked the register and turned off the display lights and did the last walkthrough of the store, checking that all the drawers were closed, all the gas-powered tools were properly stored, all the lights were off. He had done this walkthrough every evening for 4 years. He did it with the same attention every time. He paused at the window on the south wall. The new latch was secure. The window did not move in the wind. He went to the back room and got his coat. He turned off the last light and locked up. Outside on Drummond Street, the February night was cold but clear. He could see stars above the buildings at the far end of the block. The same stars that were always there, whether you could see them or not. He walked to where he had parked. He thought about Renee all the way home, not with the weight that used to accompany it, but with the gentler feeling of someone who has set something down in a safe place for the first time. Not put away, not done with, but placed somewhere that felt like it could hold it properly. He thought about the way Elena had said the name once, quietly, and then gone back to the work. That was, he realized, the most respectful thing anyone had ever done with that particular grief. Not swept it up, not examined it, not offered him something to replace it with. Just acknowledged that it was real and that he carried it, and then trusted him to carry it in his own way. He did not know what to do with that feeling. He drove home. He made dinner. He ate it. He put on the television for the noise of it without particularly watching it. He went to bed early because the days started early and he had never needed much permission to sleep. He lay in the dark for a while. He thought about Tuesday and the window latch, and the word Renee said carefully once in a warm room on Drummond Street. He thought that grief, like most things, changed shape when it was witnessed, not smaller, just different, a different weight, easier to carry the same distance. He slept. It was a Friday in early March, and Owen Vasquez arrived at Hale's Hardware at 5:47 in the evening. Elena saw him through the window before he came in. She was behind the counter logging the week's final deliveries when she saw the blue sedan she had known her whole life pull up to the curb on Drummond Street. She recognized the way her father drove, always parking with a slight angle, always leaving the same amount of space at the front. She recognized the car before she recognized the man, and then she recognized both at the same time, and for a moment she simply stood very still. Marcus was at the back, working on a new shelving unit he had been assembling after hours all week. She could hear the occasional sound of a drill or a level being tested. Her father got out of the car. Mia got out of the passenger side. Elena came around from behind the counter and stood near the middle of the store. She did not go to the door. She was not going to make this easier by going to the door. Owen Vasquez was a man who had once been impressive-looking, tall, with a manner that occupied space in a room. He was still tall, but years of choosing comfort over confrontation had done something to his manner, had made it simultaneously larger and less substantial, the way a balloon looks bigger than it is. He pushed open the store door. The bell rang. He looked at Elena. He looked at the store, the shelves, the organized sections, the register. He looked at the store for perhaps 2 seconds longer than he looked at his daughter. Mia came in behind him and stood near the door. She had the look of someone who had agreed to be here and was no longer entirely sure it had been the right agreement. "Elena," her father said. "Dad," she said. There was a particular stillness in the store. The fluorescent light above the register hummed. Outside on Drummond Street, a bus went past. "We came to talk," he said. He moved his hand slightly in a gesture that was meant to indicate the two of them together, but that mostly indicated himself. "Okay," Elena said. "What you've been telling people," he said, "about the situation in January, it has to stop." Elena looked at him. She had prepared for several versions of this conversation. She had not been preparing consciously, not in the way she prepared for quizzes or for difficult customers, but in the background of every quiet moment since Mia had come by with the canvas bag. She had known this conversation was coming, and had been, without quite calling it that, getting ready. "What have I been telling people?" she said. "That we abandoned you," he said. "That we locked you out. That those things happened," Elena said. "I told them because they happened." Owen Vasquez had a way, when he was uncomfortable, of expanding slightly. His voice went slightly louder. His posture shifted. He took up more room. It was not quite anger. It was the physical expression of someone who has decided that more volume and more space will compensate for the weakness of their position. "You're making the family look bad," he said. "Carol is. People know Carol. Her friends know Carol. When you go to a shelter and tell them that your stepmother threw you out in the cold, that—" "I didn't say Carol threw me out," Elena said. "I said I was locked out of my house and had nowhere to go. I didn't use anyone's names." He paused. "It doesn't matter," he said, though it clearly did. "People know." "What would you like me to say, Dad?" Elena asked. She kept her voice at the same register. No higher, no quieter. The same level it had been when he came in. "Would you like me to say I made it up? Would that be better? I would like you to think about how this affects other people." Elena heard the sound of a footstep behind her. Steady. Not urgent. Marcus came around from the back of the store and stood behind the counter. He did not say anything. He set his screwdriver down on the counter and stood there in the easy, contained way he had. Not aggressive, not performing anything. Just present. Owen Vasquez looked at him briefly, and then looked back at Elena. "I spent the night of January 11th in a community center on a cot," Elena said. "The night after that in a motel under an emergency voucher. I had frostbite on my fingers. I was on a shelter wait list for 2 weeks. I lost access to my laptop and my course materials and my winter coat. I used resources that are meant for people in crisis because I was in crisis." She paused. "None of that is a story I'm telling to hurt anyone. It is what happened." Owen looked at her. Something moved across his face that she could not name. Not quite guilt, not quite shame, something more complicated than either. The look of a man who has known for some time that he has done something difficult to come back from, and has been hoping, very hard, that nobody would make him look at it directly. "You should have called me," he said. "I called you 6 times, she said. For the 3rd time, in 3 different conversations. She said it with the same quality it had had the first time, not harder, not softer. Just the fact, sitting in the room. He opened his mouth. "You're going to leave," Marcus said. He said it from behind the counter. He said it without raising his voice. He said it in the exact same tone he used when he told a delivery driver where to put the boxes, or when he told a customer the price of something. It was not a question. It was not a suggestion. It was a simple statement of what was going to happen next. Owen Vasquez looked at him. Marcus looked back. There was a pause of perhaps 4 seconds. Owen looked at Elena one more time. Something in his expression shifted. Not an apology, not yet, possibly not ever, but something. A slight compression. The look of someone who has finally, against their preference, seen a thing they had been working not to see. He walked to the door. The bell rang. He went outside. The door closed. The store was very quiet. Mia was still standing near the door. She had not moved during the entire exchange. Elena looked at her, and Mia was not looking toward the street where her stepfather had gone. She was looking at Elena. Her eyes were bright in a way that said she was working to contain something. "I didn't know he was going to say that," Mia said. "About making the family look bad. I thought he was coming to—" She stopped. Her mouth pressed together. "I thought he was coming to talk to you. Actually talk. Not another stop." "It's okay," Elena started. Then she remembered her own rule about that phrase and stopped. "I know you didn't plan it." "He called Carol from the car on the way here," Mia said. "She told him what to say. I could hear her voice through the phone." Elena thought about that for a moment. Carol, in the living room of the house on Calloway Lane, with the porch light she had turned off and the lock she had changed, and the garbage bag she had packed without the coat, and without the notebook and without the $12, giving instructions through a phone to a man in a car on the way to a store where his daughter worked. She felt the anger again, the slow kind, but she felt something else too, something that was not pity exactly, but was in that neighborhood. The sense of a person who has made their own world very small and very managed, and who has to work very hard, constantly, to keep it that way. She felt sorry for how much effort that must take. "Mia," she said. Mia looked at her. "You stayed," Elena said. Mia blinked. "You're still here," Elena said. "After he left, you're still here." Mia looked at the floor for a moment, then back up. "He's been," she started, then stopped, then began again. "Growing up, when things happened between you and Mom, he always said it wasn't his place to get in the middle. And I thought that was what parents did. I thought that was what neutral looked like." She paused. "I don't think that anymore." Elena looked at her half-sister, this girl who had grown up in the same house as a ghost of a person who was technically present at every breakfast and dinner and Christmas, and who was somehow never quite included in any of them. This girl who had learned from the atmosphere of that house that Elena was adjacent rather than inside, and who had never questioned it, because nobody had ever asked her to. "I used to think he was protecting me from conflict," Mia said. "Now I think maybe he was just protecting himself." Outside the window, the blue sedan was still at the curb, waiting. "You should go," Elena said, not unkindly. "He's waiting." "I know." Mia did not move immediately. "Can I call you? Later, I mean. Not with anything like this. Just to talk." Elena thought about this honestly. She thought about what it would mean to have a relationship with Mia that was not defined by what it had always been. She thought about the difficulty of that, and the improbability, and also the fact that Mia was 18 and had learned something difficult tonight and had stayed in the store after her stepfather left. "Yes," Elena said. "You can call." Mia nodded. She pulled her coat tighter. She pushed open the door and the bell rang and she went outside. Elena watched through the window as she got into the blue sedan. She watched the car pull away from the curb and move down Drummond Street. The store was quiet. Marcus had come around from behind the counter at some point while Mia was talking, and was now standing a few feet away. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the spot on the floor where Owen Vasquez had stood. "Thank you," Elena said. "You had it handled," he said. "I did," she agreed. "But still," he nodded. She looked at the door where her father had gone. The bell above it had long since stilled. The glass was clear. Through it she could see the street lights and a couple walking a dog and the ordinary business of Drummond Street continuing exactly as it always did. She had been waiting for this confrontation for weeks, not wanting it, but knowing it was coming, the way you know when a knot in a rope is going to eventually reach the pulley. Now it had happened, and she was still standing in the same store on the same floor, and the inventory still needed logging, and the weekend was 2 days away. She went back behind the counter. She picked up the pen. She logged the last of the week's deliveries. The numbers were right. They were what they were supposed to be. She had counted carefully. The inventory was accurate. She finished, capped the pen, filed the sheet, and turned off the register. Marcus was still standing in the same spot. "I'll finish the shelving unit on Saturday," he said, not as a response to anything, just as the next thing. "I can help," she said. "I'm better with the level than you are." He looked at her. Something moved briefly in his expression that was not quite a smile but was in the same family. "You are not better with the level than I am," he said. "I've watched you use it," she said. "You consistently tilt it slightly left before you check." A pause. "Slightly," he said. "Measurably," she said. He picked up the screwdriver from the counter and went back to the shelving unit. She heard the sound of it starting again from the back of the store. Steady, precise, the particular sound of someone doing a specific thing correctly. She pulled on her jacket. She took one more look at the door, the clear glass, the quiet street. Then she went upstairs. The apartment was warm. The furnace was running. She set her bag on the counter and hung her coat on the hook, the winter coat, the green one with the hood and the broken zipper. She had not yet fixed the zipper. She was going to fix it this weekend. She had bought a replacement zipper pull at the store last Thursday, and it was sitting on the counter next to the coffee maker. She made tea instead of coffee because it was evening. She sat at the window with the mug and looked at Drummond Street, and she thought about her father standing in the store saying, "You're making the family look bad." She thought about what that sentence assumed, that there was a family to look bad, that she was part of it, that her job was to manage its reputation at the cost of her own truth. She had not told him that he was wrong about any of those assumptions. She had simply stated the facts, again, in the same even voice, and let them be facts in the room with him. She did not feel victorious. Victories required an opponent, and she had stopped thinking of her father as an opponent some weeks ago. He was just a man who had made choices, and those choices had a shape she could now see clearly, and she was not inside that shape anymore. She felt tired. She felt the particular tiredness of having spent the evening doing something that required her to hold herself steady against a significant pressure, and having held, and being now on the other side of it. She felt, underneath the tiredness, something that was solid and real. She held the mug and felt the warmth of it in her hands. Outside the window, the streetlights held their positions along Drummond Street. She drank her tea. She fixed the zipper on her coat. It took 8 minutes and a pair of pliers and the focused attention she brought to every small repair, and when she was done, the zipper ran smooth and clean from the bottom of the coat to the top. She hung the coat back on the hook. She went to bed. Mia called on a Sunday. It was 3 days after the evening in the store, and Elena was at the small table in her apartment working on the business law assignment that was due Tuesday, when her phone lit up with Mia's name. She had put Mia in her contacts 2 days ago, and had thought, when she did it, that she was probably not going to hear from her. People said things in the aftermath of difficult events that they later walked back. That was not cruelty. That was just how people worked. The version of themselves that existed in the heated moment of a confrontation was often braver than the version that woke up the next morning in the same house as the same family. She answered. "Hey," Mia said. "Hey," Elena said. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable exactly, but carrying the weight of two people who had never spoken on the phone without a specific practical reason for it. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up," Mia said. "I said you could call." "I know, I just wasn't sure." Elena set down her pen. She leaned back in the chair. "How are you?" she said. She meant it as an actual question, not a formality, and said it in the tone that made that clear. "I've been thinking," Mia said, "since Friday, a lot." A pause. "Can I talk? It might take a while." "Yes," Elena said, "I have time." What Mia said, over the next 45 minutes, was not entirely coherent. It was the way people talk when they have been holding something in for a long time, and are not sure of the right order in which to release it. She talked about growing up in the house on Callaway Lane. She talked about how it had seemed normal to her, the way Elena occupied the edges of things, never quite invited, never quite excluded, always adjacent. She talked about how her mother had always described Elena as difficult, as dramatic, as ungrateful, and how Mia had accepted this description because she had no reason not to. Carol was her mother. What her mother said about someone must have some basis. She talked about the night in January. She talked about coming home from a friend's house and finding the house rearranged, Elena's things gone from the bathroom shelf, the door to Elena's room standing open and empty. Carol had said Elena had gone to stay with a friend. Mia had not asked which friend, because she had told herself that Elena had people, that Elena had a life outside the house that Carol and her children did not know about. She had told herself this because it was easier than the alternative. She talked about the text she had sent. "The mom says you were lying" one. She said it with a flatness in her voice that was not indifference but was working very hard not to become something more. "I don't know why I sent it," she said. "I think I wanted you to tell me I was wrong. I think I wanted you to call me back and correct me." "You could have called me," Elena said. "I know." A pause. "I'm not brave." "You called today," Elena said. Mia was quiet for a moment. "Dad hasn't said anything since Friday," she said. "He came home and he made dinner and we watched television and he didn't mention it. He does that. When he's done something and doesn't know how to address it, he just moves forward. Like if he goes forward fast enough, the thing behind him can't catch up." Elena had watched her father do this for 13 years. She knew exactly what it looked like. "He loves you," Mia said. "I think, in the way he's able to, which isn't. It's not enough. I know it's not enough, but it's there." Elena thought about this. She had spent years arguing with herself about this exact question, whether what her father gave could be called love if it never translated into showing up, into protection, into presence when it cost him something. She had arrived, in the past several weeks, at a complicated answer that she was still working out the edges of. Something like, yes, probably it was love in his terms, and no, his terms were not adequate, and both of those things were true simultaneously, and the truth of the second one did not require her to deny the first. "I know," she said. "That doesn't fix anything," Mia said. "No," Elena agreed, "it doesn't." More quiet. Elena could hear Mia breathing and the faint sound of a television somewhere in the house at Callaway Lane. Her father's house, Carol's house. "What are you doing now?" Mia said. "I mean, where are you living? Are you okay?" "I have an apartment," Elena said, "above the hardware store where I work. It's small, 1 room, but it's warm, and it's mine." "And the store? You like it?" Elena considered the question honestly. "Yes, I'm good at the work. The inventory side. I'm also still doing my certificate program. 2 more modules after this one." "I didn't know you were doing a certificate," Mia said. "I've been working on it for 3 years, Elena said. She did not say this to make a point. She said it because it was true, and because she had learned to stop apologizing for the things she had done that nobody had been watching. 3 years, Mia repeated. Yes. A pause. "I didn't know a lot of things," Mia said, and the way she said it, the simple weight of it, made clear that she understood this was not just a statement about information. It was a statement about attention, about the habit of not looking, about what she had chosen not to see. Elena leaned her elbows on the table and looked at the assignment open on her laptop. Business law. The chapter on contracts. Offer, acceptance, consideration. The things required to make an agreement valid. She thought about what it meant to have an agreement with someone. What made it real versus what made it just words. "I'm not angry at you," she told Mia. She found this was true when she said it. "I was, a little, for a few days. But what you did, it came from not knowing, and the not knowing came from not looking. That's not the same as what," she stopped. "As what Mom did," Mia said. "Yes." The word sat between them on the line. "It's different," Elena said. "What you did and what she did. What you did is fixable. Maybe. If you want to fix it." "I want to," Mia said immediately. Then, more carefully, "I think I want to. I'm scared of what it means for things at home if I'm different, if I start being different." Elena understood this fear completely. It was the fear that had kept her quiet for years, the calculation of what honesty would cost against what silence was saving. The problem with that calculation was that you always undervalued what silence was costing. "It will be harder at home," Elena said honestly. "For a while. Maybe longer than a while. Carol won't like it. Dad will be uncomfortable. Things will be different." "Yeah," Mia said. "But you're 18, Elena said. "You're going to leave eventually. You're going to have a life that doesn't take place in that house. Whatever you build after you leave, that's built on who you are now, and who you decide to be." Silence. "That's terrifying," Mia said. "Yes," Elena said. "Most good things are." Mia laughed. It was a small laugh, surprised out of her, and Elena heard in it something real, not performed, not anxious, just the sound of someone who had not expected to laugh, and had done it anyway. They talked for another 20 minutes, not about heavy things mostly. Mia mentioned that she had been thinking about college but wasn't sure what to study. Elena told her about the business certificate and how she had chosen it. the practical reasoning behind it. Mia said she thought she might like psychology, that she wanted to understand why people did what they did. Elena thought privately that this was a sensible ambition for someone who had grown up in the house on Callaway Lane, but she did not say so. Before they hung up, Mia said, "I'm going to call again. If that's okay." "That's okay," Elena said. She put the phone down on the table. She sat in the apartment with the hum of the furnace and the sound of Drummond Street below, and the open laptop with the business law assignment waiting for her. She thought about what she had said to Mia, that the not knowing was different from what Carol had done. She thought about whether that was true, and decided it was. There was a difference between a person who chooses not to look and a person who arranges the situation so that the looking is impossible. Mia had not looked. Carol had made looking unnecessary by making sure everyone around her saw only the version she had arranged. She thought about forgiveness, which was a word she had been carefully not thinking about for months. She was not ready to forgive her father. She did not know if she ever would be, and she had decided to stop measuring herself against that standard for now. Forgiveness as an endpoint was not helpful. What she could do was understand clearly what had happened and why and who had chosen what, and then make her own choices from that understanding. She could let Mia call. She could be honest when her father eventually, if he eventually, tried again. She could keep going. She turned back to the laptop. Offer, acceptance, consideration. The three things required to make an agreement legally binding. She had been finding this chapter easier than she expected, because she understood the underlying logic. An agreement was not just words. An agreement required something from both sides. It required each party to give something real in exchange for something real from the other. She thought about what her family had given her, and what they had taken, and whether those two things had ever been in balance. She thought, no, they had not. She thought, and I am no longer in that agreement. She typed for 2 hours. The assignment came together with the particular satisfaction of work that uses a skill you have built over time. She checked her citations. She reviewed the argument structure. She submitted it with 20 hours to spare before the deadline. She made dinner. Pasta with a simple sauce, the third time she had made this particular meal because she had figured out the precise technique that made it come out the way she wanted. She ate at the table by the window with the lights on inside and the darkness outside and Drummond Street below. After dinner, she washed the single pan and the single bowl and set them on the drying rack. She sat in the chair with a book she had found at the charity shop, a novel, the first fiction she had read in months, because fiction had felt like a luxury she could not afford to pay attention to. She was beginning to think that was no longer the case. She was beginning to think she could afford a few things she had not been allowing herself. She read for an hour. She thought about calling Odette to tell her how things were going. She decided she would do it tomorrow. She would also call Gloria. She would call Penny from the grocery store, who had texted her 3 times in the past 2 months with cheerful updates about her life, that Elena had replied to briefly but without saying anything real. She would be more real. She was learning, slowly, that the instinct to give nothing away, the instinct that had served her so well during the hard weeks, was one she needed to start relaxing, not abandon, just relax. The emergency was over. Not everything was a thing to be managed with maximum efficiency and minimum exposure. She could let some things in. She turned off the light at 10 o'clock. She lay in the dark in the room that was hers, with the furnace ticking in the corner and the sound of the street below becoming quieter as the evening moved toward midnight. She felt the mattress under her. Still a thin twin mattress on a metal frame, but she had added a second blanket, and it was fine. It was more than fine. She thought about the night of January 11th, the concrete steps, the temperature dropping, the porch light going off, the key that did not work. She thought about how long ago that felt. Not in calendar terms, it was less than 2 months, but in terms of the person she had been on those steps versus the person lying in this room right now. The distance between those two people was not about time. It was about what had happened in the time. The cold. The community center. The harbor house. Gloria with her clipboard and Odette who counted kettles. Frances who had slept 2 nights in her car in November. Donna at the drop-in center. The sandwich. The locker key. Marcus. The gloves on the shelf. The key on the counter. The word because, said flatly, without ornamentation. Mia. Calling on a Sunday. All of these things, one after another, had built something. Not back to what was before. She did not want what was before, but forward, toward something she could not fully name yet, but could feel the shape of when she put her hand toward it in the dark. She was tired in a good way. The way you are tired when you have used yourself fully in the right direction. She closed her eyes. She slept without dreaming. deeply, with the clean sleep of someone who has done the work available to them and is ready for what the morning will bring. Outside on Drummond Street, the night moved past. The furnace ticked. The city went on being itself, enormous and indifferent and full of people in rooms, some of them warm and some of them not, some of them building things in the dark and some of them still trying to find the place to start. Elena slept. The first warm afternoon of April came on a Thursday. Elena knew it was genuinely warm, not just a break in the cold, not one of those winter days that tricks you into removing a layer you then need again by noon, because she could feel it even in the apartment when she woke up. The furnace was off and the room was comfortable, which had not been true of any morning since January. She lay in bed for a moment and felt the absence of the cold as its own specific thing, an openness in the air. She got up. She made coffee. She stood at the window and looked at Drummond Street. The trees at the end of the block were doing something. She had been watching them since February. Bare and identical and stubborn-looking, the way trees look in winter, as though the cold is an argument they are simply waiting out. This morning there was a green suggestion along the branches, not leaves yet, not even close, but the idea of leaves, the direction of it. She took her coffee downstairs at 7:50 as usual. Marcus was already there, as he usually was. He was reading something on his phone behind the counter and looked up when she came in. "Morning," he said. "The trees are starting," she said. He glanced toward the window. "A week, maybe 2, he said. She went to the back to start the morning inventory check. The day was busy. March and early April brought a reliable surge of customers who had been putting off home projects through the winter, and were now, with the arrival of warmth and daylight, ready to act. There were contractors with lists, and homeowners with specific problems, and one woman who came in 3 times throughout the day, each time with a new question about the deck she was building, having gone home between visits to confirm what she had just learned. Marcus answered each visit with the same even attention. Elena helped the 3rd time, and the woman said, when she finally had everything she needed, "You two are so helpful," in a way that assumed they had always worked together, that they were a permanent and obvious pair. Elena caught Marcus's eye across the counter after the woman left. Neither of them said anything. At noon, Marcus brought sandwiches. He had started doing this sometime in February, appearing from the back around noon with 2 sandwiches from the place 2 doors down, setting one on Elena's side of the counter without comment. She had stopped being surprised by it. She had started accepting it with simple thanks, which he accepted with a simple nod, and this was the full transaction, and it worked. Today the sandwiches were different from usual. He had also brought a bag of chips and 2 bottles of water, and set them on the step outside the front door. Elena looked at the setup. "It's warm enough," he said. They sat on the front step with their lunch. The April sun came down the length of Drummond Street at an angle that was different from winter, higher and less sharp, the kind of light that actually carries warmth, rather than just the appearance of it. Elena tilted her face up toward it briefly and felt it land on her forehead and her cheeks. The street was more active than a typical noon. People were using the warmth as a reason to be outside, moving with a looseness they had not had in months. A pair of women with a stroller went past. A delivery truck double-parked further down, and a man in a yellow vest got out and began moving boxes. Marcus was looking at the inventory list on his phone, making a note about something. He had a way of working even while not working, while eating, while in the middle of a conversation about something unrelated, while apparently doing nothing at all. The store was always in the back of his mind, and he was always doing at least one thing that moved it forward. She had found this quality remarkable when she first noticed it and had found it increasingly natural as the weeks went on. She had it too, though she had not known it until she saw it in someone else. The way her accounting module was always open in a corner of her mind. The way she was always doing a small inventory of whatever she was standing in front of, always noting what was in order and what needed attention. They were both people who noticed things and then did something about what they noticed. "The business law final is next week," she said. "How do you feel about it?" he said. "Good. I've gone through the chapter on contract formation 4 times. The remedies section is the weakest area, but I've improved it." She opened the bag of chips. "After this module, there are 2 more. I'll be done by September." "What then?" he said. He said it with the full attention he gave things that mattered. She had thought about this. She had spent more time thinking about the after than she had ever allowed herself to do in the years when the after was theoretical. Now the after was becoming concrete enough to plan for. "A full-time job with a salary," she said. "Something in operations or financial management. The certificate qualifies me for entry level, and I have real work history now." She paused. "I'd like to keep working here. Even if I get something else, I'd like to keep doing the books here." Marcus looked at her. "I'd keep you doing the books," he said. You're the reason the books make sense. They made sense before, she said. They made sense in the way that a drawer full of tools that happen to be in the same drawer makes sense, he said. You made them make sense the way a toolbox makes sense. Elena looked at him. That's very specific praise, she said. I'm a specific person, he said. She ate a chip. The sun moved down the street. A bird sat on the parking meter across the road and did something small and self-important with its wings. Odette called me last week, Elena said. The woman from the shelter. Yes. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to talk to someone on the wait list. A girl, 20 years old. Situation similar to mine. She said sometimes it helps to hear from someone who has been through it. What did you say? I said yes. Elena looked down at her sandwich. I went yesterday afternoon. We sat in the back room and I told her what the first few weeks were like. The community center, the motel, the drop-in center, how to talk to the intake people, what to keep track of. Marcus nodded slowly. She cried, Elena said. Not because it was sad. Not because it was sad. I think because someone was treating what had happened to her as real, as actually real. She paused. I know what that feels like. Before it feels real, you spend a lot of time not being sure whether it's actually as serious as it seems, because no one around you is treating it that way. It was real, Marcus said. Yes, Elena said. It was. The bird on the parking meter flew away. The delivery truck further down the street finished its business and pulled back into traffic. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Yes, he said. Renee, she said. She had said the name once before, that Tuesday evening with the window latch, and he had not flinched then, and he did not flinch now. If she had called you that night, the November night, what would you have done? He was quiet for a moment. Gone to get her, he said, without hesitation. Immediately. She didn't call. No. Why do you think she didn't? He set his bottle down on the step. He looked at the street. I've thought about this for 7 years, he said. The best answer I have is that she didn't call because she wasn't sure I would come, not because she knew I wouldn't, because she wasn't sure. He paused. She grew up watching people not come. Our father left when she was 4. Our mother did her best, but she was always working. Renee learned very early that needing something didn't mean that the thing would arrive. Elena held her sandwich. I would have come, he said. I know that completely. But she didn't know it. And there wasn't enough time for her to find out. The sun was fully over the building now, and the step was warm under them. A child went past on a bicycle with training wheels, moving with great seriousness, concentrating. The girl I talked to yesterday, Elena said. Her name is Alice. She has a phone. I gave her my number. Marcus looked at her. I told her to call if she needs anything in the next few weeks, Elena said. Practical things. Someone to ask. Someone who has the information. He nodded. That's good, he said. They finished their lunch. The chips were gone. The sandwiches were gone. Marcus collected the wrappers into the bag and stood up and went inside. Elena sat on the step for 1 more minute, tilting her face up toward the April sun, feeling it on her forehead. She thought about the night of January 11th, the way she had been thinking about it less and less as the weeks went on. She thought about the cold and the steps and the porch light going off. She thought about those hours as a fact she now carried, not a wound, not a story she told herself, not something that defined her, but a fact. Something that had happened and had shown her the exact shape of things. The shape of her family, which had been one shape, and had now become something different, smaller in some ways, larger in others, complicated and unresolved and not yet finished changing. The shape of herself, the specific person she was, the one who counted things and organized things and studied in the early morning, and took the free things when they were offered, and said true things in the same register whether anyone was listening or not. The shape of this, right now, the warm step on Drummond Street and the April light and the person inside the store who had put a key on a counter without explanation and meant it. She went inside. The afternoon was busy. 3 more contractors came in. A man wanted help calculating how much primer he would need for a room of specific dimensions, and Elena did the math from memory in about 30 seconds, and the man looked at her as though she had done something extraordinary, which she had not. She had just paid attention. At 4 o'clock, Mia texted. The text said, got into State College, just found out, psychology program. Elena smiled. She typed back, that's excellent. I'm proud of you. There was a pause, and then Mia sent a string of 3 exclamation marks, which was more enthusiasm than Elena had ever seen her express in a text before. At 5, a woman came in who needed a specific hinge for an old door, not unlike the woman several weeks ago, but a different door and different specifications. Elena found it by the second try. The woman said thank you and left satisfied. At 5:30, the last customer of the day left, and Marcus locked the front door. They did the closing procedure together, the same one they had been doing every evening for months. Elena ran the inventory count. Marcus did the register reconciliation. They cross-referenced one item, a count discrepancy on the toggle bolts that turned out to be a shelving error from that morning, and corrected it. They filed the paperwork. Marcus looked at something on his phone, made a small sound and said, "Supplier is raising the price on the stainless screws in June. I need to adjust the wholesale order. I can update the pricing model tonight," Elena said. "Tomorrow is fine," he said. She looked at him. He was putting on his jacket. He had a specific way of putting on a jacket, the right arm first, then the left, then a small adjustment at the collar. She had noticed this months ago and had stopped noticing it because she no longer needed to notice it. It had become part of the landscape of the day. "I'll do it tonight," she said. "I have time, and I want it done before the weekend." He looked at her. Something moved in his expression that was the same thing that had moved there the first time she had said something that surprised him, back in January when she had listed her qualifications in the flat. Precise way of someone who is not trying to impress anyone, but is simply accounting for what is true. "Okay," he said. She went upstairs. She made tea. She opened the laptop and updated the pricing model, which took her 40 minutes because she did it properly rather than quickly, making sure every formula was right and every cell was correctly linked. She sent the updated file to the shared folder. She closed the laptop. She stood at the window with the tea and looked at Drummond Street as the evening settled. The light was still lingering in the way it did in April, that reluctant horizontal light that made everything on the street look slightly golden. The trees at the end of the block were still only suggesting leaves, but the suggestion was stronger than it had been that morning. She thought about Alice, the girl at Harbor House who would be on a wait list for the next several days. She thought about what those days looked like from the inside, and she thought about the fact that Alice had her number. She thought about Mia getting into the psychology program. She thought about September, when the certificate would be done. She thought about Marcus saying, "I'd keep you doing the books," the flatness of it, the total absence of performance, the way it meant exactly what it said. She thought about the green coat on the hook by the door, with the zipper she had fixed herself. She thought about her mother's cabinet, the phone numbers on paper, the preparation, the belief that you should know who to call before you needed to call them. She had a list in her own cabinet now, not the same list, but the same idea. The idea that the people who mattered should have their names somewhere safe, written down, available when you needed them. She had Odette, Gloria, Francis, Marcus, Mia, Penny from the grocery store, who had sent 4 texts in the past 2 months and would now get real replies. Alice, who was new on the list and would perhaps not need to be on it for very long, because she had information now that Elena had not had in January, and information was the difference between a problem that ends you and a problem that makes you into someone who knows how to end it. She set the mug down. She was 22 years old. She was managing the books of a small hardware store on Drummond Street and finishing the second-to-last module of a business certificate and living in a one-room apartment above a store that smelled like metal and oil and dry wood, and the furnace was old but it worked. She was not the person who had stood on those porch steps in January. She was not that person either. That person was still in her, the knowledge of those hours, the specific temperature of them, the waxy color of her fingers under the porch light of the Harbor House bathroom. That knowledge did not go away. It settled into the base of you and became part of the structure, part of what you were made of. She was made of quite a lot of things now. Some of them were terrible. Some of them were earned. Some of them had been given to her by people who had chosen to give them, and she had learned, was still learning, how to receive a gift without making the person giving it feel that they had to justify the giving. The last light left Drummond Street. The streetlights came on, one by one, the way they always did, turning the evening a familiar amber. Elena stood at the window and watched this happen, the way she had watched it every evening for months, and found that she was still, even now, slightly surprised by how ordinary it was. The lights coming on, the evening arriving, the street going about its business, the city continuing, enormous and honest, as it always had and always would. She turned away from the window. She got her notebook from the counter, the green one, the one Mia had brought in the canvas bag, the one with 3 years of plans in it. She opened it to the most recent entry, the one from the evening in March when she had written, "Things are better than they were." Below that, she wrote today's date. She wrote, April. Warm. Business law final next week. Alice at Harbor House. Called twice. Doing better. Mia, State College, Psychology. Pricing model updated, sent to shared folder, certificate done in September. She paused. She wrote, "The trees on Drummond Street are starting." She closed the notebook. She put the pen back in the notebook's clip. She set it on the counter next to the coffee maker, next to the laptop, next to the mug she had not yet washed. She looked at all of these things, the ordinary objects of an ordinary life, accumulated deliberately, one at a time, from the ground up. She washed the mug. She dried it. She set it back on the left side of the counter where she always reached for it first. She turned off the light. She went to bed. Outside on Drummond Street, the April night was mild and clear, and the trees at the end of the block stood in the dark with their first green suggestions, patient and quiet, doing exactly what trees do, reaching steadily toward what is coming, without rushing, without looking back.